Marvel. Awakening Words, Follow the Law, and Defeat Thanos. Chapter 81. The next day, in the morning, Xingyao Private Airport. Sky and Miles, who were sitting in the plane, looked outside, and security personnel in black battle suits came and went. It clearly doesn't feel right. Yesterday Miles heard that Lin was going to Sky's mother Ms. Jiang for something. It just felt vaguely bad. After returning, I told Sky about my feelings, and Sky also said that he felt the same way. Lin went to great lengths to find herself and deliver herself to her mother. Just to ask for something. Fools know that this thing is very important. And the two of them, or Sky, might have to be exchanged as hostages. Lin has never shown any obvious malice, and let them go back to their hotel without sending anyone to watch him. Add to that Sky's desperate desire for her mother's trace. It made her a little unwilling in her heart, and she always wanted to gamble. Miles O2 saw this and was reluctant, so he could only follow. After all, Sky is his girlfriend, plus what Lin said, Sky's motherhood is probably unusual. Maybe this time it was really a surprise. So, he gritted his teeth and followed. Well, wealth is at risk, and this one might be able to hold a golden thigh. But, after boarding the private plane, through the window, I saw the outside of the airport carrying weapons back and forth, with guns hanging on their bodies, and a large number of black battle suits as members of the Special Operations Team. Can't help but feel remorse. This time, seems really reckless. But there was nothing to do, I was already on the plane, and there were so many people outside that I couldn't run if I wanted to. I can only say, people are the knife, I am the fish, and I will be slaughtered by others. Then, sitting in the plane, looking at the security personnel standing not far away, he sat very cautiously in his seat. Not long after, Lin got into the plane, looked at Sky and Miles not far away, walked over slowly, and sat in front of them. Then he stretched out his hand to signal to the security guards next to him, and gave them a few simple commands to prepare some drinks and food. Soon, some drinks and food were placed on the table. Lin picked up 2 bottles of iced coffee, handed them to Sky and Miles opposite, and said with a smile. Sky, Miles, if you're thirsty, drink first, and if you're hungry, you can eat. You'll see your mother in a moment. As he said that, a smile appeared on his face. Sky and Miles looked at each other, and then Miles asked tentatively. Mr. Lin, isn't that just sending Sky to see his mother? Why is the movement so loud? With that said, Miles looked up at the large number of Special Forces team members outside the window. Lin also took a brief look along the line of sight and said with a smile. Ms. Jiang has a special identity. These are for safety. Otherwise, there is still a possibility that people will not be able to come back when they go there. Then, he said to Miles with a smile. Myers, I suggest you read more about the customs of the East. Ms. Jiang herself, don't look weak on the surface, but in fact, she is quite determined or ruthless in her actions. Maybe, your identity issue will become an obstacle between you and Sky. Well, there's nothing wrong, it's up to Jiang to accept the combination of Inhumans and ordinary humans, especially after his daughter Awakening's powerful ability. If you pull your crotch too much, it's really possible to make a secret move and kill you. Then, choose a better Inhuman for Sky for easy control. Miles heard Lin's words, his expression changed, suddenly regretted, and asked Sky to go to his mother. Listening to Lin's words, his mother was afraid that it was a big trouble. As he thought, he held Sky's hand tightly. After Sky listened, he also held Miles with both hands, as if telling the other party not to give up, not to give up. For a while, it seemed that the large number of security personnel outside was forgotten. Well, mainly because Lin's smile is too friendly, like a good friend, without malice. Afterwards, Lin simply answered a few questions from the two of them. Then watched the two comfort each other word by word. Soon, the members of the Special Operations Team below the plane became less and less, and the plane began to make a rumbling sound and began to shake slightly. With a violent shaking, the plane officially took off. Time passed by second. Lin perceived that he had already flown above the sky, and the 3 planes behind him were following, and then perceived the coordinates that he had placed on Gordon. A faint smile appeared on his face, and he said softly under the gaze of Miles and Sky. Space Shuttle. The moment the voice fell, the pilot of the plane immediately saw a circle of huge amounts of sparks appearing in front of him. Looking at the circles revealing snow-covered mountains, I immediately knew that this was the world-famous Himalayas. The driver's eyes were full of shock, but remembering the previous instructions, he gritted his teeth and drove directly into the circle. The same goes for the next 3 planes. At the moment of crossing, the positioning of the aircraft system began to be confused, and it quickly restarted automatically to see its current position. Himalayas. This turned out to be real, not a fantasy. The pilot of the plane shouted inwardly. At the same time, Sky and Miles, who were sitting on the plane and looking out of the window, also saw the circle with Mars, and also saw that after passing through the circle, the seats below were covered with ice and snow, of mountains. He immediately knew that he had just gone through a magical process and came to a new area. Sky was very surprised, and even shouted at Lin in a little panic. "Mr. Lin, did I just have a hallucination? Is it a mirage just now? I actually saw a circle of sparks floating in the air." Miles next to him also shouted in surprise. Seeing this, Lin said casually with a faint smile on her face. "Sky, Miles, don't worry, everything happened just now. This is normal. It's just the power of space at work. Your mother, who has a subordinate, also holds the power of space. When the time comes, you can try it too." Hearing this, Sky and Miles seemed to be hit hard in their hearts, and they were silent. This world actually possesses extraordinary power. And her mother actually possesses extraordinary power. Lin glanced at the shocked expressions of the two, and a smile formed on the corner of her mouth. Immediately, Lin turned his gaze to a direction to the east, as if seeing some strange treasure in that direction. And that location is morning, afterlife. Jiang had just finished eating the pizza that Gordon brought back from New York. Taking advantage of her free time, she began to think about what Gordon had brought to her the other day. The trace of her own daughter, she definitely wants to know. However, it is absolutely impossible for her to betray the Inhumans for her daughter. But the trouble is, the other party didn't know what means to force Gordon to tell him where he was born. Although Gordon was allowed to come back, such behavior, in Jiang's opinion, must be malicious. So Jiang asked Gordon to find a new location a few days ago. "I want to transfer all Inhumans. A.J. A suitable location could not be determined in a short period of time. She and Gordon visited more than 10 locations in a row these days, but they always felt inappropriate. Either it is too barren, or the climate is harsh, and some even have many threats from nearby animals, making them uninhabitable at all. Therefore, it is difficult to transfer the location in a short time, and can only continue to stay in the next life now. Still, she basically had to travel to 2 or 3 locations every day, doing field trips. Only by transferring as soon as possible will the sense of crisis in her heart dissipate a lot. She didn't forget that she was once caught and the pain and torture she suffered was utterly horrific. At that time, wanting to die was a luxury. Every time I recall, I was once dissected step by step with a scalpel, and my internal organs were taken out one by one. Jiang's eyes flashed with strong killing intent. If it weren't for the ability to control vitality, and in addition to his husband, he would have to kill the entire village in order to save himself, so as to provide himself with enough vitality. Now I am afraid that he is still a corpse in the wilderness. Every time I think of this, the image of the corpses of everyone in the village appears in my mind. Jiang's eyes always flashed a strong sense of guilt and a strong resentment towards her husband. How nice to die. There will be no more burdens. Soon, Jiang adjusted her emotions. She now has a lot of tasks to do, the Inhumans can't be destroyed in her hands, that Lin's threat must be lifted. Pity. I heard Gordon say that his strength is very strong, or else he would directly send an alien to kill him, there would not be so much trouble. She is constantly making plans for the development of the afterlife. The figure of Gordon appeared in front of her, and then she heard Gordon speak quickly. Jiang, it's not good. There's a plane coming in our direction. Could it be Lin and the others? Immediately afterwards, Gordon began to complain to himself. Blame me, really blame me. If it wasn't for me leaking the location, he wouldn't have found it here. Jiang looked at Gordon, who was constantly blaming herself in front of her, and stepped forward and said comfortingly. Gordon, Don't say that, it's possible that the other party is just passing by. Let's take a look first. It doesn't have to be Lin and the others. Having said that, there was a gloomy look on Jiang's face. In an environment like the next life, planes flew by. If you say that you are not looking for the afterlife, who will believe it? I'm afraid, time waits for no one. Thinking of this, he immediately said to Gordon. Gordon, show me the plane first. Let's decide. When Gordon heard it, he immediately grabbed Jiang's hand and activated space ability. Space shuttle. In an instant, Gordon took Jiang to a high mountain. Jiang raised her head and looked at the plane that was circling not far away, as if she was looking for a landing spot. Seeing this scene, Jiang immediately said to Gordon with a dignified tone. Gordon, it's very likely that the other party came from the afterlife. Well, let's go back and inform the combatants first. Then, you are responsible for moving those ordinary aliens to location 9, where they can live temporarily, and later we will find a new place to build the afterlife. On the side of the plane, we have to test it first. See what the other party is intending. When Gordon heard Jiang's reply, he nodded solemnly, then took Jiang's hand and used ability to bring her back to the afterlife. Soon, with the appeal of her family, the fighting members of the Inhumans were called up by her. And Gordon is also constantly flashing, holding other people, casting space ability, and quickly moving to location 9. Lin, at the moment, is circling the afterlife, waiting for the pilot to find a suitable parking spot. Sky and Miles on the side were also quite nervous. Although seeing my mother is a very happy thing. But watching the members of the special operations team next to them picked up their guns and made a fighting stance. Feeling terrified. Looking at this situation, it is very likely to fight. But looking at Lin in front of him, some don't know how to go on. For fear that the other party will directly tie him up, he will not even be able to speak at that time. Lin looked out the window, closed her eyes slightly, and frowned. In his perception, there were a lot of spatial fluctuations just below, and the frequency was quite high. It appears almost every second. It seems that in the afterlife this is ready to run. With that in mind, Lin said softly below. Here, no space shuttle. The voice fell, and in an instant, a pale silver ripple, centered on Lin, quickly spread around. Seeing this, Lin once again felt the fluctuations in the space below, and nodded slightly. In his perception, the spatial stability of the entire space has been greatly improved, and there is no large amount of spatial fluctuations like before. And Gordon at the moment just teleported back to the afterlife, and then held a father and daughter in his hands, and was about to take them to location 9. Result. Suddenly feeling a familiar energy passing through his body, he cast ability again, but found no effect. His face suddenly turned ugly. He knew that the power that made him lose ability the last time had appeared again. Seeing this, Gordon quickly ran to Jiang and said urgently to him. Not good, Jiang. This time, just like what I said last time, I temporarily lost the space ability and couldn't take people to space. This time, it's definitely Lin's group. Jiang's expression changed when she heard what Gordon said, and she quickly activated her ability. Feeling the rapid flow of a large amount of life force in the body, I was slightly relieved. Then he immediately said to the fighters money not far away. Let's try your own ability, and see if it is affected. If there is a problem, please reply immediately. When the combatants heard it, they also subconsciously activated the resource ability. All of a sudden, a large number of aliens appeared with not weak energy fluctuations, some exuding flames, some threateningly cold, some thunderous roars, and so on. Everyone said there was no problem, and Jiang felt more at ease. It seems straight. This time it should be dedicated to Gordon's spatial ability. Even so, if Gordon's space shuttle ability is lost, he will not be able to quickly support him in a big battle, and he will probably suffer heavy losses in the next life. Therefore, we can only try to negotiate first. If it really doesn't work, then go to war. No way, the next life cannot afford to lose. I hope Lin said to Gordon that the malice wasn't that big. Thinking of this, Jiang looked at the plane that was preparing to land in the distance, and called roar to all the fighters. Take the lead and head towards the place where the plane landed. At the moment, Jiang, with dozens of combat members behind her, strode towards the place where the plane landed not far away, and hurried away. When they just arrived, they saw a large number of members of the Special Operations Team wearing combat black battlesuits getting off the plane and starting to carry some of the weapons placed on the plane, such as submachine guns, machine guns, and even rocket launchers, and so on. All of this made Jiang and the dozens of aliens behind her very vigilant. It seems the visitor is not good. Soon, Jiang saw a very handsome man in a delicate suit descending from the front plane. Behind him, followed by a man and a woman. The girl was very energetic, wearing a simple white shirt and jeans. More importantly, her face is somewhat similar to her own, and even more similar to her husband, Mr. Hyde. Combined with what Gordon told Lin before, it all made her understand. That girl. She is the daughter she thinks about day and night. Jiang forcibly suppressed the excitement in her heart, her eyes full of vigilance watching the members of the Special Operations Team who were constantly carrying weapons in the plane. Then, he made a move roar to an inhuman who could use defensive ability behind him, and asked him to follow him to try it out. 843, Rodo, be ready to activate your shield at all times, there is a good chance of danger. As long as the other party makes a move, don't worry about anything, activate ability first. Jiang saw Luo Duo nodded heavily, and then patted her shoulder to comfort her, not to be too nervous. Then strode towards Lin and the others, with Rordo following. At this moment, Lin, with far beyond human vision, has long seen a group of people standing not far away. Especially the lady in the front with a more familiar face showed a slight smile on the corner of her mouth. Then recruit roar next to Sky and Miles, and led them forward. The members of the combat team behind wanted to keep up, but Lin extended his hand to signal no need, and the team members continued to guard next to the plane. They knew the strength of their own boss. In their eyes, even if they all do it, they are afraid that the boss won't be able to fight back and forth. They just want to do their duty to go forward and to please them by the way. Well, if the boss said no, then no. Behind him, Sky and Miles looked unclear, but because of Lin's move roar, they followed closely behind. As Lin walked, she spoke slowly to Sky next to him. ACFIK, I seem to have seen your mother just now. It's not far ahead, you should be able to see it after a while, and meet your mother. Hearing what Lin said, Sky, who was originally panicked or even fearful, immediately felt a little embarrassed, and said with surprise. Mr. Lin, really? Really? I can see my mother soon. Miles next to him saw Sky with a cramped face, and stepped forward and patted his shoulder to comfort him. Soon, in the eyes of Miles and Sky, a lady in regular clothes and a slightly fat man behind them walked towards them. When Sky saw the lady and saw that the other party had a somewhat similar face to himself, he was immediately a little excited and held Miles' hands tightly. It was as if he was telling the other party that he had found his mother. Seeing this, Miles clasped Sky's hands tightly, as if to comfort Sky not to be nervous. Lin next to him glanced at it and pouted in disdain. Then, she said loudly to Jiang who was not far in front of her. The lady in front should be Ms. Jiang. I don't know. I asked Gordon to bring the news the other day, did he tell you? I said it in advance. If you don't get a reply for a long time, I can only bring Daisy to you. Otherwise, it would not be so presumptuous to come to the afterlife. The opposite Jiang seemed to hear what Lin said, a flash of anger flashed in her eyes, and then recalled the strength of the other party described by Gordon, and her anger was extinguished at once. The same loudly replied, Mr. Lin, welcome to the afterlife. On behalf of the afterlife, I welcome you. Thank you so much for bringing my daughter to me in person. Then, the tone changed, with some expectations and some tentative words. So, Mr. Lin, can my daughter come over now? When Lin heard what Jiang said, she glanced at Sky who was full of expectation, a smile flashed in her eyes, and she replied with a smile. Definitely. I'm really looking forward to the mother-daughter reunion scene. Saying that, Lin was under Sky's incredulous gaze. Reach out to the two of them and let them go to the opposite side. Sky and Miles looked at each other, and their surprise flashed. This scene was different from what the two of them had expected. Originally thought that the two of them would be taken as hostages, or even tied up and traded with their mother as a trade item. But, Lin even let herself go to her mother without doing anything to stop her. Sky, who didn't have time to think about it, directly took Miles' hand and ran towards his mother Jiang impatiently. At the moment, Jiang looked at her daughter who was running towards her, her eyes flashed with excitement, and she turned solemn. She didn't expect Lin's move at all. But precisely such a move shows that he is not malicious now. More importantly, this kind of behavior is vaguely implying to himself that this time, he is confident that he will eat a clean meal in the next life, and he will not worry about any resistance in the next life. This made Jiang feel heavy from the bottom of her heart, and even vaguely feel hopeless. Can such an enemy really be able to resist in the afterlife? At the moment, Lin looked at Sky and Miles running towards Jiang with a faint smile on her face. The reason why he let Sky and the two leave was to show his initial goodwill, and he didn't want the two forces to go to war directly. On the other hand, he is confident that if it is a battle, he can suppress all the Inhumans up and down, so whether Sky returns or not has no meaning to Lin. Definitely, there is one more important thing, and I hope that after the two communicate, I will arrange for another person to do it. This is also the only meaning he thinks of the existence of the Inhumans other than the mist of Terry. It is also the source of his goodwill. Soon, Lianren saw Sky, Jiang mother and daughter hugging each other very excitedly. After waiting silently for a while, feeling that the timing was just right, he walked up to Jiang and said softly. Okay, Ms. Jiang, you can stop communicating with your daughter for a while. You can continue tonight. Now, I have one thing I need to be willing to talk about. Jiang looked at Sky who was holding her tightly, her heart heavy. The other party's request is coming. Then, with a faint smile on his face, as if without any vigilance, he said softly to Lin in front of him. Okay, Mr. Lin, let's talk about the afterlife. Saying that, Jiang stretched out her hand, secretly activated ability, and shook it to Lin. As if expressing gratitude. Lin looked at Jiang's forward hand, a strange look flashed in her eyes, and said in her heart. Ability not working. Then, with a smile on his face, he reached out and shook it, as if two old friends had met. He knew Jiang very well, whether it was her ability or his character. Especially when facing the daughter who blocked his alien transformation plan in the end, he still activated ability and resolutely absorbed Sky's vitality, as if to kill him. Well, it's a wolf slayer. Therefore, Jiang has long been vigilant. At the moment, Jiang has just activated ability, ready to absorb the opponent's vitality and destroy the opponent in advance. As a result, in an instant, I felt that my own vitality was completely out of control, and it was in a silent state. Suddenly startled in the heart, panic rose, and the body moved slightly. But he didn't change his face, he continued to smile all over his face, and reached out and held it. Sky, who was next to him, saw his parents and Lin, shaking hands with each other and smiling, and immediately felt very happy. Didn't see the expected battle scene, isn't this a very happy thing? Then, I saw that the two simply agreed a few words. Immediately, Sky saw his mother Jiang invite Lin into the afterlife as a guest. Lin also smiled, agreed to the invitation, and invited several security personnel to follow him, as if to be a guest to the afterlife. Miles next to him looked at the scene just now and felt very strange. He was very rational, and he had not been so easily carried away by emotions like Sky. The scene where the two parties were testing each other, and even about to start a battle, instantly transformed into an atmosphere of treating guests to dinner. He couldn't help but be surprised from the bottom of his heart, but there was still no expression on his face, for fear that his actions would trigger a new round of war. Now, all he wants most is that everything is safe. Sky had met her mother, and preferably his mother would have recognized his boyfriend's identity. Well, it's better, give him a buck, and let him take Sky to enjoy traveling around the world and celebrating. In this slightly eccentric atmosphere, Lin follows Jiang's footsteps into the afterlife, and on the way sees Gordon, the eyeless man, and greets Roar in a friendly way. As if the person who limited his space ability before was not him. Well, the restrictions haven't been lifted yet, but Lin is afraid that if Gordon runs away with all the Inhumans, he will be a muggle. Jiang, who is in the lead, was chatting with her daughter Sky next to her, and recalled the scene just now. My heart was filled with a lot of dread, and again I heard my daughter say that she was looking for something to ask for something. In an instant, the vigilance in his heart rose high, But his face did not change, and he continued to chat with his daughter to see if he could get out of Sky's mouth and see what it was. And Jiang is also constantly thinking. In the whole afterlife, the most precious thing is strangers. But obviously, the other party probably didn't come for the aliens, or else they would just start arresting them. Besides, the most precious thing is Tarragon mist. That is, the necessary product of inhuman awakening. Thinking of this, she constantly had hesitation in her heart. In terms of strength, he would definitely not be able to beat the opponent. After all, the opponent had restricted his ability just now, and the ability of other aliens could definitely be restricted as well. At that time, these people are really civilians, and fighting against the members of the Special Operations Team with a large number of weapons is simply a massacre on the one hand. Just run away. Thinking of escaping, Jiang couldn't help but feel a bit of a headache. To say that the most convenient tool for escape is Gordon's space shuttle. As long as he was given time, even if it was only half an hour, it would be enough to pick up everyone in the future. But Gordon's ability was banned and has not been restored. Undoubtedly, the other party is warning him not to run away. Is it possible? Can I just run away with all the awakening Inhumans? Leave those aliens or ordinary people who haven't had awakening here, bet on the other party's temperament, and see if the other party will start killing. Thinking of this, Jiang shook her head slightly. It's not that she never thought about cooperation, but when she thought of cooperation, she recalled a person named Strucker before. He picked up the scalpel to dissect his body step by step, and even let himself watch the whole process of dissecting himself very pervertedly, constantly torturing himself. Even allow yourself to cast ability. Healing over and over again, dissection over and over again. It is simply impossible to live, not to die. Thinking of such a picture, she instantly became extremely vigilant against all human beings. Even though Lin kept courting him, she didn't let her guard down. But the situation has reached such a point that I can only listen to the other party first. What exactly do I want to do? It's acceptable, let's talk. It really can't be done. Even if you fight for your own life, you have to bite off a piece of meat from the other party. At the moment of Jiang, the lower limit that can be endured in my heart has been constantly pulled down. Lin also seemed to feel something, smiling, and kept looking at the beautiful scene around her. It was as if he was just here to see the view. Well, it is worthy of being called the afterlife, and it is worthy of being an alien force with extraordinary ability. Absolutely love this scene. Lin, who is thinking about whether to invite those aliens who built the afterlife to come to his villa and remodel himself. Suddenly, I heard Jiang speak very politely from the front. Mr. Lin, there is a tea room in front of you, you can drink tea in it first and wait for a while. On my side, I will simply arrange for my daughter Daisy to find you. Hearing what Jiang said, he looked up at the tea room and nodded slightly. Okay, Ms. Jiang, I'll wait for you in the tea room later. Hearing Lin's confirmed reply, Jiang immediately arranged for a young female alien, Euler, to take Lin and the others to the tea room. And he, with Gordon and his daughter and her boyfriend beside her, went back to his room. Now, she needs to ask again and make a final decision. Once a decision is made, it will directly affect the future development of the afterlife. It can be said, to live or to perish. It's up to your own decision. Afterlife, tea room. Sitting cross-legged on the mat, he was watching the whole process of washing, burning, and pouring tea, the young female Inhuman, Euler, in front of him. Cannot help feeling very satisfied. Soon, the teacup in front of him was poured with tea, and Lin took it up. Smell it gently, the aroma is tangy. Take a bite. Sweet. Refreshing. Unforgettable memories. Cannot help but admire. Your tea-making skills are definitely a master. After Euler heard it, she said modestly with a slight smile on her face. Mainly the leaders and some elders like to drink tea, so I also practiced this craft. If you're feeling well, Mr. Lin, of course it's an honor. Well, I can talk, but unfortunately, it's not my type. Lin briefly glanced at Euler, looking at what could only be considered a normal face. The inner, 843, commented. Then, simply praise Euler a few words, and start drinking tea slowly. Don't be too hasty to do things. He is now in the dominant position, and the other party can't escape from his palm no matter how he escapes. Just drink tea slowly. Honestly, it does work. He's thinking now, big guys like Ancient One love tea. After returning to the Shining Star group, did you find a Oni-san who could cook tea? Or simply cultivate one? After waiting to make friends in the future, invite them to tea. Well, the thought came to mind. An image came to Lin's mind. Iron Man Tony, Thor, Hulk Bruce, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, even S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury and more. Sitting cross-legged on the mat, surrounding yourself, then drinking tea, constantly complimenting the situation. Thinking of such a scene, Lin immediately had a smile in his eyes. This picture is so cool. Diverge your mind while drinking tea. Soon, seeing Jiang entering the tea room, her expression became positive. Then, like a master, he stretched out his hand to invite and said, Ms. Jiang is here. Sit down quickly, Miss Aura's tea art is really good. Let's have tea first, and we'll talk about the rest later. Well, as soon as these words came out, the force went up. After Jiang heard this, she was stunned for a moment, not knowing what to say. In her imagination, Lin might ask herself for something directly, or be polite in advance and ask for it again. He may even threaten himself directly, without paying anything, he directly kills the whole afterlife. But never expected. The other party turned out to be like a master, inviting himself to drink tea. Don't even talk about it. Jiang's face froze, then returned to normal and sat opposite Lin. Waiting for Euler next to him to pour himself tea. Well, she also likes Euler's tea art, and she rarely touches wine and the like. But she often drank tea, which was a habit he had developed since he was a child. Drink tea, see who can't stand it. Result. Jiang watched Lin keep tasting and praised Euler's tea skills, and even started to exchange skills with Euler on washing tea, cooking tea, and even sealing the pot. Suddenly a little unable to sit still. Now this situation puts more and more psychological pressure on her. It was as if a guillotine appeared in front of him, slashing towards his neck at some point. Unable to bear, he said tentatively. Mr. Lin, thank you very much for sending Sky back. I heard from Gordon before that you have something to discuss with me. What's the matter? If I can help, then I will. Lin glanced at Jiang, who was a little impatient, and said calmly. Not a big deal. I just want to find you to deal with a person or a faction. Who is it? Jiang couldn't help but asked. In response, Lin glanced at it, and then spit out a few words casually. Baron Strucker. Hearing this name, Jiang's face sank immediately, as if recalling some terrifying picture. Some gritted teeth asked. Mr. Lin, what do you know about this Baron Strucker? Well, I heard Jiang's voice, and my teeth were bitten. This hatred is really stronger than myself. Then replied lightly. He blew up my car before. If it wasn't for my ability, or I would be torn apart with the car. Later, I encircled and suppressed some of Baron Strucker's forces, and although there was some success, it was basically unscathed. Ms. Jiang, how is it? Would you like to cooperate with our Shining Star group? Well, this time I came to Jiang and the Inhumans. The most important thing, besides the Mist of Terrigen, was to deal with this Baron Stella. Speaking of this Hydra Baron Strucker. Lin felt impatient. He directly handed Hydra Emily to S.H.I.E.L.D. As a result, there was no movement from S.H.I.E.L.D. Later, I asked Phil Coulson, a good guy, and the other party directly said that Emily was the agent of Shang Kingdom and came to steal secrets. Again, what is the result now? Died. Suddenly, Lin was speechless. He was totally disappointed with this S.H.I.E.L.D. No, Snake S.H.I.E.L.D. Guys, is it all Hydra except Nick Fury and his crew? Even the people who tortured the information were all from Hydra. Then if he sends another person, isn't he sending Hydra home? He decided to support another force and let Baron Strucker feel the pain and torture. And this force is none other than the family members or the Inhumans who hate Strucker to the core. Tut tut. Baron Strucker has been capturing Inhumans, taking them for dissection and experimentation. He didn't believe that Jiang or the Inhumans could refuse his suggestion. Sure enough, soon, Lin heard Jiang say in a deep voice. Okay, Mr. Lin. I promise to do this. Immediately afterwards, his tone changed, and he said tentatively. How exactly do we work together? Seeing this, Lin said lightly. Don't worry, this time I'm directly thinking of killing Baron Strucker. I am here to provide both weapons, intelligence, and people. They will fight alongside the Inhumans. The loot aspect. If you meet someone who has been arrested, you can hand them over to you in the next life. The rest, let's negotiate. Then, while drinking tea, Lin talked with Jiang about the details of the cooperation. Basically, Lin provides intelligence support, weapons support, and will also send some people to fight with the Inhumans. The main force is basically Inhumans, and Lin's team is the team leader. To be honest, he was deeply suspicious of the combat power that these Inhumans with little combat experience would be able to exert once they were in actual combat. Definitely, Jiang is definitely a little reluctant here. But I couldn't come up with information or weapons, so I could only keep stressing that more people should be sent. In response, Lin couldn't deny it, thought about it, and agreed. Later, let's see how many people Blackstone Security needs to train. To be honest, actual combat is the best way to exercise. Only when blood and fire are intertwined can true warriors be cultivated. In the afternoon, private jet. Lin was sitting in the middle of the plane, looking at the blossoming white clouds outside the window beside the bed, with a lazy smile on his face. Negotiations with the Inhumans Jiang went very smoothly. In other words, under the influence of strong strength and common goals, the other party is very cooperative. As for the Terrigan Mist, Lin looked at the box carried by the security guard next to him with a slight smile on his face. The cooperation was negotiated, and a little bit of Terrigan fog came out. Jiang's face was full of reluctance when she heard that Terrigan was in the fog. But once you hear it, it's only for one person. Jiang readily agreed. I'm afraid I want more. However, he also paid 1,000,000 yuan as his sincerity. This is trivial for Lin. Later, earn even more when looting the Hydra Baron Strucker legacy. He doesn't believe it, just how much fruit can the Inhuman race that is not a system at all get? At most, move some gold and silver treasures, plus some captured aliens. As for land property rights, company shares, etc., it is better to be controlled by Xingyao Group. Even if it was given to him, he would not use it. Well, Lin has this confidence. To put it poorly, the afterlife of the O2 Inhumans is just a grass-headed team, a gathering place for a group of Inhumans. If it was really a system to master the power of transcendent ability, Lin would not dare to cooperate with each other like this. Overall, however, the trip went very smoothly. Sudden. Bell. 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 A phone rang. Lin frowned slightly. You know, this is on the plane, and the phone in his hand is specially made to answer. Therefore, there are not many people who know this contact information. Who will call? Lin picked up the phone and looked at the name that appeared on the phone with a look of surprise. After answering the phone, I chatted briefly and hung up the phone. Then, directly instruct the security guard next to him. Tell the captain, let him get in touch, we're going to New York Airport. The security personnel nodded and walked to the captain's room. Soon, Lin felt the plane flying in the other direction, and a smile formed on the corner of her mouth. He feels that this trip to New York will definitely be rewarding. The next day, in the morning, at Stark Villa. Lin, who had just entered the main entrance of the villa, asked a question to the machine next to him. Jarvis, where is Tony? Tell him, I'm here. Soon, a male voice replied. Okay, Mr. Lin, Mr. Stark is upstairs. Currently practicing boxing and may not be able to communicate for the time being. Hearing this, Lin's eyes lit up. Tony practices boxing, tisk tisk, that's pretty cool. Immediately go up the stairs and run upstairs. As soon as he entered the second floor, he saw Tony, his bodyguard Happy Hogan, punching in a simple ring. Tony saw Lin's coming. Immediately stretched out his hand to signal and shouted. Lin, here you are. Would you like to come up and play? Hearing Tony's shouting, Lin had a strange look on his face and said to Tony. Are you sure you want to fight me? Saying that, make a boxing motion. Tony spoke confidently, and made an offensive gesture. Rest assured, I have undergone professional training and will definitely keep it. Then, as if a little worried, he said. Let's just punch, nothing else. Well, it looks like Tony still has the self-awareness that Lin uses extraordinary powers, and he's screwed. Hearing this, Lin answered decisively. Okay, no problem. With a strange smile on his face. The chance to beat Iron Man violently is still the kind of punch to the flesh, which is relatively rare. Happy next to him heard the conversation between the two and walked down the stage silently, taking off his protective suit. Then found a new set of protective clothing and handed it to Lin. After Lin received it, she put it on directly. Then he walked to the ring and said with a smile. You know what? This opportunity is my dream. Last time you robbed me of that Oni-san model, this time it's finally over. Saying that, he waved his fist at Tony and said very confidently. This time, don't give up easily. Seeing this, Tony felt uneasy in his heart, but out of face, he said as if reminding. It was agreed in advance that it was boxing, and those messy powers should not be used. Hearing this, Lin nodded with a smile. Seeing this, Tony felt more uneasy and felt reckless. But there is no way, both of them are standing on the stage, it is impossible to step back, or else they will lose more of their face. Then, before Lin was paying attention, he shouted. Start. In an instant, he threw himself forward and punched Lien. Seeing this, Lin smiled slightly, relying on her physical fitness far beyond ordinary people. Simultaneously move forward, block with your left hand, and hit back with your right hand. A punch came down and was swiped at Tony's head. Well, he took some strength, for fear of concussion this genius. Then, boom. Tony fell directly to the ground. Yell. Then on the ground, he waved directly at Lin and said. No more 847 calls, no more calls. Well, the tone is a bit begging for mercy. Yes. Lin replied with some regret, as if she wasn't addicted yet. Tony said quickly. Yes. Yes. Would you like to have a fight with Happy? While talking, he stood up and waved to Happy next to him. Lin went on to reply with some regret. Then no need. To be honest, I'd rather fight you. When Tony heard this, he said directly as if threatening. Would you like me to call you in a Mark 5? It'll be fun for you to play by then. Hearing this, Lin said helplessly. You upgraded the Mark 1 again. Forget it, hitting steel is better than hitting your flesh with a touch. Do not fight. Saying that, he waved to Happy next to him. Would you like to try a few punches? At the moment, Pepper also came up, followed by a somewhat glamorous woman in a business secretary outfit. When Lin saw it, a smile suddenly appeared on her face. It was his former secretary, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff. Well, it looks like S.H.I.E.L.D. has sent Black Widow to be Tony's secretary again. Ha ha. I just don't know how Black Widow felt when he saw his former chairman. Pepper sees Lin in the ring and Happy who just entered the ring. Tony said curiously to the side standing next to him. Tony, what's going on? Are you punching? At the moment Tony took a sip of the thick dark green soup, wiped his mouth, and said to Pepper. Yes. 9. Then, he asked the cool-looking and beautiful woman behind Pepper. What's your name? Black Widow Natasha Romanoff replied indifferently. Natalie Rothman. Then he glanced at Lin in the ring, and secretly said something bad. Hearing the decidedly nonchalant tone, Tony raised his eyebrows, but noticed Natasha Romanoff's gaze. With a malicious smile, he said jokingly. Have you practiced boxing? Do you want to play a game? Then, without waiting for Natasha Romanoff to agree, he turned his head and shouted at Lin. Lin, do you want to play a game? Lin heard this with a clear smile on her face and said with a smile. If it's her, then I won't fight. I know her, she's still pretty good. Said, nodded to Natasha Romanoff, and said with a clear smile. Isn't it, my former secretary, Miss Natalie? Natasha Romanoff didn't reply yet. Tony shouted in surprise. What? Do you know each other? Natasha Romanoff replied blankly. Yes, I worked in Shining Star Company before. Then, as if knowing that Lin would not reveal her identity, he couldn't help but complain. It's just that the company has too many tasks. Can you imagine being at the company at least 18 hours a day, 24 hours a day? To make a meeting record, you can't record it, but you have to write it by hand. One department visit a day, 2 weeks in a row. Enjoy the blessings of 007 every day. Admired to hear Natalie's complaints, but also looked at Lin in surprise. Good guy, this is using women as bullies. Tony gave Lin a big thumbs up and complimented. Lin, you showed me what a true capitalist is. Dude, Lin wanted to make fun of Natasha Romanoff, but he got scolded instead. Standing on the ring, he said a little embarrassedly. Doesn't that feel like Natalie is a talent? Prepare to train well, but I ran away halfway. Then the tone changed, a little malicious, and invited Natasha. Natalie, do you want a fight? I know your strength. This tone seemed to imply that Natalie would expose your identity if she didn't have a fight. Well, I didn't want to fight at first. After all, because of the physical fitness far beyond ordinary people, I would definitely not be able to fight this way to the limit of human beings, and the experienced agent is very rich. Who told Natasha Romanoff to complain about him? Don't blame him for making a bad move. Natasha Romanoff raised her eyebrows when she heard Lin's invitation. This was her revenge. Immediately, the invitation was accepted. Happy looked at the two next to him, then walked off the stage silently, and handed a new protective suit to Natasha Romanoff. Well, if you want to fight twice, what a god. Result. Natasha Romanoff directly reached out his hand to signal no need, and jumped directly into the ring under the surprised eyes of Tony and Pepper. As soon as he entered the ring, he looked at Lin, who was fully armed, and complained directly, as if he was agitating. Boss, fight me, you have to wear protective clothing. Hearing Natasha Romanoff's ranting tone, Lin's face froze. Watch this scene, a man and a woman are playing. The woman was not prepared for any defensive measures, and the man even wore protective clothing and gloves. Kind of like bullying. But in fact, you don't know that you are a professional agent. A boss like yourself would not be able to beat him if he hadn't used his words and words, okay. Lin took off his protective suit silently. Well, he decided to give Natasha Romanoff a good look this time. Definitely, it has to be fair and just on the surface. Otherwise it's time for Pepper and Tony to complain again, and even Happy has to complain. Natasha Romanoff saw Lin take off the protective suit and hand it to Happy next to him. As if he had sensed something, he made an attacking posture, and his eyes revealed a feeling of extreme calmness. Suddenly, Lin's intuition was alert. No, I'm going to be beaten up this time. Then, Lin thought to himself. Powerless. Weak. Exhausted. Depression. Quote. Just as Lin showed her eloquence, Natasha Romanoff seemed to sense something and didn't shout at first. At Tony, Pepper and Happy looked surprised and started to attack. When Lin saw this, her pupils shrank and she stepped back. As a result, the inner meditation was immediately interrupted. Only the first few effects remain. At the moment, Natasha Romanoff felt that his body was weak in all aspects, even his negative emotions were high, and his fighting thoughts were greatly weakened. Immediately know that this is probably the black hand under Lin. Immediately, he cursed inwardly. No martial arts. Immoral. He even attacked a weak woman. But with his strong willpower, he directly controlled his muscles and attacked forward. Lin's perception showed that the effect had already appeared, and a malicious smile appeared on her face. With his physical fitness far beyond ordinary people, he directly resisted with his left hand and waved his right hand. As if to reenact the scene where he knocked down Tony. Result. Seeing this, Natasha Romanoff grabbed his right hand directly, and then leveraged his strength to fall Lin to the ground with a back fall. Suddenly, in addition to the pain, Lin was a little stunned. Although he did not directly cast the attack ability, but why did he do this? I've already attacked myself, and I can't even beat an agent. Kind of embarrassing. With this in mind, Lin was ready to directly use stronger power to regain his place. Sudden. Natasha Romanoff seemed to perceive something, raised his hand and said loudly. Sorry, I fouled, I admit defeat. Lin was immediately speechless, not even giving him a chance to find his way back. It is worthy of being an experienced agent, and it is worthy of being a future Avenger. Immediately, without saying much, he walked down the stage silently. Looking at Tony laughing aside, he said nothing. Well, although there is an embarrassing incident, it also shows a problem for myself. Melee is his weakness, Money Jiao. When encountering close combat, it is very likely that life will be in danger. I knew this before, but now I am deeply aware of it. Well, if it wasn't for being knocked to the ground alive by a female agent who had already undermined her, I'm afraid this awareness would not have been awakening. For this, perhaps I have to thank. Lin thought with some bitterness. Immediately, watching Pepper chatting with Tony, and then being asked to have a handprint by Natasha Romanoff. After the two of them left, Lynn looked at Tony, who was clearly smiling. Some helplessly said, "Tony, now you can say, what's the matter with me?" Originally, Lynn felt a little curious after receiving Tony's invitation on the plane yesterday. But entering Stark Villa today, Tony was drinking the thick dark green soup. Immediately thought of Tony's invitation. Tut tut. This is to come to him and see if there is a way to save him. It seems that the plot of Iron Man 2 is about to start. However, in this plot, Lynn didn't feel that it was of great help to him, and he was now counted as Tony's friend. Later, he developed new elements, the new arc reactor, which was just a phone call away. Well, at most it's a finished product, don't even think about technology. But that's enough. As for the big villain Ivan Vanki, the Whiplash, for Lynn, he is just a small role. Just send a special operations team leader, and his life can be killed. Although his technical level is very high, Lin Yun is not specialized in playing skills. He was playing with extraordinary power, and he was playing with words and deeds. There's a genius on the technical side, Tony, and there's an Iron Man, and that's enough. If there are any technical difficulties or equipment, ask Iron Man directly. With the friendship between the two, it is not a problem. Therefore, he did not pay too much attention to the plot of Iron Man 2, and his eyes are now focused on the excavation of other things. For example, Inhumans, or Hydra, Kamar Taj and so on. To put it mildly, this incident is purely a matter of Iron Man's personal 847, and it is an important part of his rise. Others don't really mean much. But it seems that it is not without good mining. Lin feels that Hammer Industries seems to be good. It is possible to expand the development of Shining Star Group in the arms industry. His Duncan military industry, but has encountered development bottlenecks. Maybe with the help of Justin Hammer's idiotic behavior, he didn't dare to say annexation, but it would be no problem to capture most of the fruits. Mind so. Lin said with a smile, as if implying something. Is there a party tonight? Invite me to participate. Hearing this, Tony said helplessly. There is no party today, but you can come to my birthday party in a few days, so that you can have a good time. Immediately afterwards, his tone changed, and he asked with some seriousness. Lin, ask one thing. Last time you said that your ability is called Divine Word, and after listening to your introduction, I feel very powerful. So I want to ask. Does it have the ability to heal? Speaking of at the moment, Tony's eyes flashed with anticipation. A smile flashed across Lin's face, and her tone was somewhat ambiguous, as if hinting at something, and said jokingly. My ability can not only heal, but also make people more durable. What's the matter? Do you feel a little empty? A little bit shorter in the evening and chili pepper at night? Bless you, it can make you feel good enough. Hearing this, Tony's face turned black, but he said helplessly. I'm very strong at this. Don't bother you to worry anymore. Then, his face was very serious, he stared at Lin's eyes, and said very solemnly. If your ability can really heal a person, can you take a look at my current body? Having said that, Tony's face was covered with a wry smile. My body is poisoned now, and if I don't treat it, I'm afraid my life won't be long. Hearing this, Lin's face turned serious, as if he had just learned the news and realized the seriousness. He whispered to Tony. What's the matter? You tell me. You need to know the specific situation to target treatment. Immediately afterwards, Tony told him about the target poisoning, and the fact that it was impossible for him to break away from the energy core now. After listening, Lin said very seriously. I have a general understanding of your business. I can try to heal. But don't get too excited, you're already at the cellular level. Anyway, let's test it first. Hearing this, Tony nodded heavily. Seeing this, Lin silently said. Explore life. In an instant, with a strange wave, Lin's brain emerged with Tony's details. Then, he frowned slightly, and the situation was more serious than he imagined. But it is not impossible to save, just relying on the keel in his hand, can bring people back to life, what can't save? But, in order to ensure the smooth development of the plot, Iron Man completed the metamorphosis, or not just one time. Then, under Tony's gaze. ACFI. Lin spit out two words. Cure. The moment the voice fell, Tony seemed to see a green light in front of him, and then, every cell in his body seemed to be soaking in a hot bath, very comfortable and comfortable. A faint black liquid began to flow from the surface of his body. Seeing this, Lin frowned slightly, feeling a little sick, and said softly, "Clean." In an instant, Tony's entire body, including the clothes, was clean, like new. Tony, at the moment, had a smile of enjoyment on his face. It's as if the body has never been so comfortable. Soon, eyes opened and the effects felt very different from their own bodies. He looked grateful to Lin, and immediately took out a monitoring device next to him. Test your body. It was found that the degree of poisoning of the body target was greatly reduced, as if it had just been touched. A grateful smile appeared on his face. But Lin said with a serious face, "Tony, I checked your question just now. Don't look at the healing, your body is much better this time. But as long as you still wear the energy core, the problem of poisoning will still exist. Even if I heal again, the root cause of the problem will not disappear, and even he will hide deeper and deeper. It is very likely that my treatment will be completely ineffective in the later stages. So, I strongly recommend that you don't wear steel armor, arc reactor, try not to use it frequently. In this case, with my ability, I can guarantee your life for at least another 10 years. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but could he possibly get away from the arc reaction? Just relying on each enemy in the future, coupled with the arrogance in his heart, how could he stop using the steel armor?" Sure enough, when Tony heard this, he began to talk a little bit, and said something perfunctory. "I knew, Lin, you could definitely do it. Thank you so much this time. The birthday party in a few days will definitely make you have fun." Immediately afterwards, we started to change the subject and talked about other things. Seeing this, Lin smiled helplessly and cooperated very well. After chatting for a while, suddenly, a phone rang. Lin frowned slightly at the phone number, but answered it anyway. Seeing this, Tony didn't bother, and began to throw away the bottle of thick dark green soup and replace it with a bottle of red wine. Opened the bottle and drank. Soon, Lin's call ended, and Tony started drinking. While drinking, I started talking about the difference between Oni-san and the model, the representative. Well, it was quite lively. The two discussed endlessly. One said that he was experienced, and the other said that he had experienced all of his masterpieces. Fortunately, Pepper was not there, otherwise, I don't know if Tony would dare to continue the discussion. That afternoon, New York, in an office. Lin, who had left the Stark Villa, sat across the table, looked at Nick Fury in front of him, and said jokingly, "What's your game? Has the name changed? Do you want me to provide one? I have a good idea." Looking at Nick Fury, who was expressionless and said nothing, Lin said helplessly, "My chief, what do you have to do with me, can you tell me now?" Originally received a call from Nick Fury this morning, saying that he had something to look for. Lin was still a little curious. "I don't seem to have done anything major recently. At most, I took the keel, but I shouldn't care about S.H.I.E.L.D. They don't know what the keel is. Well, at most I met Natasha Romanoff today, but I seem to have been criticized and attacked again. It must have been reported." Lin groaned inwardly. Listening to Lin's question, Nick Fury took out a document, handed it to Lin, and said slowly, "Lin, you should know about your father's relationship with us. I have a plan right now, and I hope you can participate. This is the introduction to the program, and Natasha Romanoff's assessment of you. You can take a look. By the way, Natasha Romanoff, thank you so much for helping him cover up this time, and for letting me express my apologies to you." Hearing this, Lin raised an eyebrow. This plan, wouldn't it be the Avengers' plan? Tut tut. There are quite a few treasures that Avengers will come into contact with in the future. Especially the 6 infinite gems, all passed through the hands of Avengers. For this reason, he can take a look at it with reluctance. Well, he definitely isn't, because of Natasha Romanoff's assessment, and is only interested in watching. While thinking about it, he was quite interested and started reading with the document in his hand. While reading, he raised his eyebrows and said jokingly, "This typical capitalist. I understand this. After coming to my company, he should work. I give Natasha Romanoff a lot of money, and I get her pay card at regular intervals every month. Jing Jing. Vengeful revenge, Natasha Romanoff is right. As a human being, when it's time to take revenge, you've already hit the door. If you don't hit back, will you kneel down and beg for mercy? The business operations planning ability. Natasha Romanoff is right. The current market value of Shining Star Group is 300 billion yuan, which is inseparable from the strategic planning I have made, and no one has the courage to make the company invest a lot of money into emerging industries. The bad taste is serious. I like to see other people's jokes. I have to criticize Natasha Romanoff for that. I never like to see jokes. I'm professionally trained and I'm a very serious person. At this point, I suggest that Natasha Romanoff must re-evaluate. Lin constantly complained while looking at the file. Well, as expected of my secretary, I have been working for 2 or 3 months. I am so busy with work that I have not forgotten to observe my personality. It seems that the distribution of work is still not enough. However, there is still ability. This file is okay, except that he likes to watch people's jokes. The good aspects are all right, the bad aspects are up for negotiation. After a while, the entire file was read, and Lin stopped complaining. On the other hand, Lin looked at Nick Fury, the braised egg head in front of him, and said jokingly, "You Avengers. This name makes me feel a little sad, a little depressed. I recommend a name. How do you feel? The Superhero League. This name feels great. Also called Rising Star Alliance, I feel good." Then looking at Nick Fury, who was staring at him with an expressionless face, Lin stopped joking and said helplessly, "Looking at your posture, you don't know how to joke at all. Avengers, just Avengers. I find it interesting that if the position you offer is suitable, I can consider it. But, what does your file say as a consultant position? I'll just ask a question. How much is a month's salary?" Regarding Lin's question, Nick Fury said slowly, "No money." But, Lin's face changed when he heard that he had no money. Isn't he playing himself as a crazy? If you work for nothing and don't give you money, the fool will agree. But as soon as he heard the but behind, Lin calmed down and saw what the slickness of this braised egghead was. Our bureau will give you Duncan military orders on a large scale. At the same time, your products, such as smartphones, software, etc., will cooperate with your Shining Star Group. Also, we have people in the military, the political arena, and the World Security Council who can build a bridge for your Shining Star Group. Hearing this, thought flashed in Lin's eyes. This condition seems to be good. In addition to requiring 3 high-quality source powers, the 5th order requires that the wealth value has reached 100 billion, which is converted into meter yuan, which is to require Lin to hold trillions of funds. The current valuation of Xingyao Group is about 300 billion yuan, which is still a little far from 1000 billion yuan. Therefore, Lin still attaches great importance to the development of Shining Star Group. After all, although he has the confidence to develop the company into a trillion-dollar group, the time will definitely be long. If someone matches the bridge, the time can be greatly shortened. It can also be upgraded quickly. Thinking of this, Lin gave Nick Fury an affirmative answer. If that's the case, I can promise. But there is one request. This consultant is just a name. Don't try to blackmail me with this position, it's pointless. In response, Nick Fury nodded. Well, on this ship, if you want to go further, how can you do it without paying a price? Then, Nick Fury starts talking with Lin about the details of the collaboration. Well, he chose to talk to Lin this time around. On the one hand, it is indeed because of his special status. On the other hand, the industries involved in Lin's Shining Star Group are indeed very valuable. Let's talk about his Duncan military first. The quality of the products inside is good, and the price is also cheap. It is worth buying in large quantities. This time to talk about cooperation, it is just to say what was originally determined. For another example, his Xingyao mobile phone, as well as the intelligence system of Toutiao, etc., and the support of public opinion are always of great help to Shield. This cooperation is not a loss, and there is even a profit. While talking, Lin constantly complained inwardly. As expected of the director, he said things like high prices and rebates are really just words. I really don't know how much money he stole in Shield. His private base has been repaired a lot. But Lin did not suffer, but because of this high price, the profit margin was higher and he earned more. Give some rebates, just give some points, it will not affect your own money. If you really encounter a clean and honest bureau chief, then it will be troublesome, there will be a lot of things to do, and you will not be able to make money, so what is there to cooperate with? Well, Nick Fury is a good director in that regard. Subsequently, the two began to discuss more intensely. They discussed how to make S.H.I.E.L.D. pay more money reasonably. Then let Nick Fury make a little more money. Well, in the end, Lin has to make more money too. Finished chatting with Nick Fury, on a private jet to Los Angeles. Lin keeps looking back on the collaboration with Nick Fury, talking with a faint smile on her face. This time, it can really be said to make a lot of money. A large number of orders alone can make Shining Star Group make a lot of money. Not to mention, S.H.I.E.L.D. has military and political connections within the United States, and even has influence abroad. It will definitely bring a new development opportunity for Shining Star Group. Immediately after, Lin frowned. He had forgotten how happy he was talking about cooperation just now. S.H.I.E.L.D. will collapse in a few years, won't everything be over by then? Also keep S.H.I.E.L.D. from falling. Lin felt a little distressed. The cooperation has been negotiated, which means that the interests of the 285 people are beginning to be closely intertwined. Once S.H.I.E.L.D. collapses, it will definitely bring no less loss to the Shining Star Group. And letting S.H.I.E.L.D. collapse, Lin felt a little sad. Nick Fury is a good chief. Seriously, Lin has never known such a good director. Tut tut. The quoted price, such a smooth cooperation, made the Xingyao Group eat a lot of money, and its mouth was full of oil. With that in mind, Lin began to think about how to help Nick Fury take control of S.H.I.E.L.D. No, Snake Shield. After thinking for a while, Lin picked up the specially made phone next to him and dialed Nick Fury's number. Well, as soon as the cooperation was established, both of them left contact information for quick contact. Soon, the phone was connected, and the familiar voice of Nick Fury could be heard in Lin's ear. Lin, what's the matter? Lin's tone was slightly serious, as if reminding something. Director Nick Fury, is your phone safe? I have something to tell you. As if he understood something, Nick Fury directly pressed a button on the table and said in a deep voice. Now our calls have been severely restricted and no one can monitor them. You say, what's the matter? Hearing this, Lin's tone was a little dignified, but as if reminding something. Director Nick Fury, given the very good collaboration we've just talked about, there is one thing I must remind you of. My dad left a message saying he had met Hydra Baron Strucker. And his car accident is closely related to that. Including Emily, who I gave you earlier, I suspect he should also be from Hydra. I heard Phil Coulson say that the Emily you interrogated was the agent of Shang Nation. And dead. Because of our close working relationship, I highly recommend you pay attention to the inside of your bureau. There is definitely a big problem. Especially the interrogation department. Hearing what Lin said, Nick Fury was expressionless, his tone did not change, and he said it directly. We already understand what you said. A detailed investigation has been carried out. Well, to be honest, as soon as Nick Fury heard the message from the interrogation department, I knew immediately that something was wrong. Emily, even if she is Shang Guo's agent, he wants to hide, his ex-husband CIA, S.H.I.E.L.D., and even someone in the political arena. How could it be lurking in a commercial company? Then prepare yourself to let your confidant check again. As a result, the news came that the person was dead. This immediately made Nick Fury nervous. Good guy, say die. What do you mean, is this director of yourself a decoration? Doesn't this seem to be a problem? And then sent people to investigate the interrogation department. Result. Those interrogated all had accidents and either resigned or died. No matter how you look at it, it looks like a defection. Immediately, Nick Fury knew that he was about to catch a big fish. The problems in the bureau are serious. He has now started screening one by one to see which one belongs to the people around him. Black Widow, Phil Coulson and others have passed his screening. It has also helped me to identify myself one by one. Hearing Lin's reminder again, this time knowing HYDRA's information 0. Immediately understand, who is the enemy. After understanding the enemy, the next step is to strike. After Lin got a definite reply from Nick Fury, he briefly chatted and hung up the phone. Lin still has confidence in Nick Fury's ability. Being able to be such a big chief, withstood so much pressure behind, can prop up the mess of Avengers. Plus, there's such a powerful character as Captain Marvel behind it. As long as the goal is known, the following series of plans will be arranged in full swing. At that time, Hydra was afraid of suffering. As for whether to remind Nick Fury of his old boss, the thought flashed through Lin's mind and gave up. Without proof, with his trust in Pierce, he wouldn't believe it. Even if he believed it, he was afraid that he would start an investigation into the Shining Star Company. Because you are the chairman of Shining Star Group and know that Hydra Baron Strucker is normal. After all, your father has a direct relationship with him, and he attacked you, and you also caught people. But why no Pierce is a Hydra thing? Doesn't this show that there are ghosts in there? Definitely, I will still remind Nick Fury when the time comes. As long as Nick Fury has been 5.8 in the SHIELD director position, the development of Xingyao Group will be greatly assisted. Well, on the importance of a good director to the development of the group. A week later, at the office of the chairman of Shining Star Company, Lin looked at the news pushed on his mobile phone, and there was a strange look in his eyes. Tony Tank wears steel armor, fighting Bear Country Mecha Agent. This title is so tempting. One look at the author, oh, the indie writer, and it's not surprising. In order to attract some attention, this title is normal. Then, he ordered to Vera. Vera, help me get in touch with Tony and say I'll be waiting for him at Stark Villa in 10 minutes. Okay, Mr. Contacting. Soon, a soft voice came from Vera. Sir, Mr. Stark has been contacted. He's at Stark Villa now. Hearing Vera's reply, Lin nodded slightly. Stand up and start imitating Kamar Taja's magician, constantly drawing circles. Soon, a sparking teleportation tunnel appeared in front of Lin. Looking at the familiar picture on the opposite side, especially the surprised eyes of Pepper and Tony, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Then step forward. In an instant, from Los Angeles to New York's Stark Villa. Well, actually, it's just a matter of words. I chatted with Caecilius before, learned the space teleportation magic they cast, and prepared to try it out. After all, the past life is very curious. Result. The past is unbearable to look back on, and in the end it was replaced by words. Rank 4's words are easy to follow, and a thought is enough to adjust the display method. Well, Lin mainly thinks that, when he performs this trick, he looks very handsome and has a lot of personality. After stepping into Stark's villa, Lin waved to the stunned Pepper and Tony. Then he said condescendingly, I learned this with a friend. How is it? Is it easy to use? Very handsome. There is nothing wrong with this, I learned it myself, and it is exactly the same. Lin heard Tony say it with admiration. Who is this friend of yours? Someday you want to come over and sit together and teach me. When Lin heard this, she could only make a haha and say next time next time. When people arrive, don't they reveal their secrets? Then, with a straight face, he said something serious to Pepper. Pepper, what happened? How did I see the news that Tony had a fight while he was racing? Now Tony is in a lot of trouble. Pepper complained to Lin. Lin, help me persuade Tony. During this time, he was obviously not in a good state. He made me the chairman of Star Industries and went racing. Don't you die. Hearing this, Lin looked at Tony suspiciously. Didn't you treat him yourself? Why are you still so crazy? Tony gave him a non-negotiable look back, as if telling him again. Say what you should say, don't say what you shouldn't say. Seeing this, Lin yelled haha and persuaded Pebble. Don't worry, I will definitely persuade Tony. He is not only responsible for himself, but more importantly, he is not responsible for you. But, I have something to look for Tony now. Speaking of which, Pepper, you seem to know something, and you just left, leaving Tony and Lin behind. Seeing this, Lin asked Tony. What happened? Didn't I treat you with me? The physical condition should be much better. Hearing this, Tony replied with a wry smile. The target poisoning situation is serious again. Although the treatment has reduced a lot, it seems to be stimulated and constantly deepened. Speaking of which, Tony opened his chest, and Lin clearly saw that strange black lines began to spread from his heart. I need you to heal again now. What's more troubling is that now the technology of the arc reactor has been leaked. Speaking of this, the wry smile on Tony's face became even more intense. Now, a large number of forces have begun to encircle and suppress Stark Industries. The troubles facing me are worse than I imagined. Well, now the situation is also expected by Lin, but it is basically a near miss. Ivan Vanke's attack gave Tony an opportunity to get out of the crisis. Well, the help from S.H.I.E.L.D. is indispensable. However, with the help of Xingyao Group, it should be possible to send some favors and earn a small amount of money at the same time. Mind so. Lin spoke to Tony in a low voice. Don't worry, I'll take a look and treat you again. As for the encirclement and suppression of other forces, Xingyao Group can contact some people to help you speak. The rest is up to you. Hearing this, Tony nodded heavily. Then, Lin showed his words to Tony. Cure. Soon, Tony closed his eyes slightly, as if enjoying the process of gradually reducing the toxins in his body. Soon, the healing energy disappeared. Tony opened his eyes, picked up the instrument next to him and started testing. It was found that it returned to normal. Said gratefully to Lin. I'll trouble you this time. 2 days later, my birthday party, don't forget to come. Hearing this, Lin shook his head slightly and said apologetically to Tony. Sorry, Tony, I've had a few things going on lately. I'm afraid I'll be absent from your birthday party. However, I will send someone to deliver the birthday present here. Well, this birthday party, according to the historical trajectory, 80% will be messed up again. Staying there by yourself, it's not good to help, it's not good to not help, it's better not to go. Now he has more important things to prepare for. Accepted Hammer Industries. This is a big piece of fat in the whole plot. As long as Hammer Industries is annexed, even if only half of it is swallowed, the market value of Shining Star Group can at least increase to 200 billion. A full increase of about 2/3. That is, the market value of 500 billion. It is equivalent to being promoted to rank 5, and the wealth value can satisfy about half of it. Why not 850? Lin doesn't pay attention. Hearing Lin's refusal, Tony was a little surprised, but didn't think too much. Then he waved his hand, indicating that it was okay. Only in the rain, Tony briefly chatted a few words. After seeing that there is no other thing to do, start to perform Space Shuttle. Back in Los Angeles, in my office. Then, he ordered to Willa Vera. Vera check, is Ivan Vanke still in prison? Also check Hammer Industries, see all his assets, and his relationship with Ivan Vanke. Okay, sir, we're investigating. Soon, Vera's voice rang in Lin's ear. Sir, according to the information inquiry, Ivan Vanke is now dead. However, when investigating Hammer Industries and Justin Hammer's intelligence, I found traces of Ivan Vanke currently serving Hammer Industries. The relevant information about Hammer Industries has been sent to your computer. You can watch it anytime. Hearing this, Lin didn't make any extra expressions, went back to his seat and turned on the computer in front of him. Read the report Vera sent him. As he read, a smile formed on the corner of his mouth. After a while, Lin made a phone call and instructed her assistant Catherine. Catherine, help me call the person in the company who is responsible for investment and annexation of enterprises. Xingyao Building, top office. Since the market value of Shining Star Group is over 100 million, Lin has started to build Star Shining Building belonging to Shining Star Group. The goal is a Los Angeles landmark. The group specially invited the infrastructure team from the east to build the Xingyao Building with guaranteed quality and quantity. Been staying for a month now. All members of Shining Star Group expressed their satisfaction. Now Xingyao has a huge influence in Los Angeles. As an employee of Xingyao, wearing a badge and wearing the shirt of Xingyao staff, walking on the road will make others look at it with admiration. But at the same time, because Lin, who is a top capitalist, continues to exert his strength. Everyone started to work hard as if they were on a zipper. 996 is light. Lin now has all the staff head towards 007. Well, this is also the reason why the Shining Star Group is developing rapidly. It's all because the employees of Shining Star are very hardworking. And investigate its source. On the one hand, Lin keeps asking Vera to screen high ability and potential employees on the entire network. On the other hand, Lin continues to follow his words, selecting employees who are both loyal and capable. At the same time, Lin also uses words and deeds to ensure everyone's health, so that all employees stay up late to work every day and feel refreshed. After the physical examination of the company's employees, it was found that there were basically no problems and they were very healthy. Even the anecdotes of the company were directly reported later. The harder you work, the healthier you are. There was a lot of uproar for a while, but with Lin's strength, it was suppressed. Well, that's what the top capitalists are all about. With extraordinary ability, it is so arrogant. You say, Xingyao Group, can it be successful? Now, Lin is in the conference room, watching everyone below. These are employees of the company responsible for investments and business mergers. It is also a department that Lin has focused on before. After all, with the memory of his previous life, he can discover many new opportunities. But the energy is limited, coupled with the industry is too complex. You can only invest money to get the maximum benefit. At the same time, some competitors were directly invested in the budding stage and annexed. Or just like he did with Apple before, throwing money into the holding company, making it go bankrupt, and dominating the smartphone market. It can be said that the market value of Shining Star Group has continued to rise, and these people have contributed greatly. Some investments may not bear fruit yet, but some have already achieved initial results and have begun to give back a lot of cash flow to Shining Star Group. Well, as for the market for open-source smartphone systems, the Android system still exists, but it has become a niche system. Basically, most companies choose the chaos system of Xingyao. Xingyao's support is too great. The Android company simply can't come up with so much money to fight, and even if it can, the company behind it won't let it. Not to mention, Xingyao Group kept pulling back. Xingyao also secretly holds the shares of Android company. Although it is not a major shareholder, it is very influential. After making some decisions, Xingyao's people directly joined other shareholders and refused directly. Especially with a decision like this, which involves investing a lot of cash into a bottomless pit, it is very easy for Shining Star to convince others. As a result, the Android company can't go up or down, which is very embarrassing. These are closely related to those in the investment and corporate annexation sector. Therefore, Lin is still very satisfied with these people below. Their treatment is also quite good, and the salary and bonuses are constantly getting. Therefore, go to work more seriously, for fear of losing this hard-earned job. At this moment, Lin, looking at everyone's focused eyes, smiled and said aloud. Now, we, Shining Star Group, will face a major development opportunity. The following news is very important. Everyone needs to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Saying that, he gestured to the assistant Catherine next to him to give everyone a non-disclosure agreement. After everyone signed, Lin looked around at everyone and said solemnly. According to a reliable source, Hammer Industries, their president, Justin Hammer, will soon face jail time. When the time comes, Hammer Industries will have no one in power and will be in chaos. Good time for a formal annexation. Then, Lin looked at the people who couldn't believe it, smiled and said nothing, as if to let them digest the news. Soon, this major news directly caused the people below to start a heated discussion. Is what the boss said true? That Hammer Industries has really become a piece of fat. You must know that our company's market in the arms industry has been stuck in a bottleneck. If you can annex Hammer Industries, it will open the door all at once. Yes, you are right, and Hammer Industries, the manufacturing plants and R&D personnel under it are a good complement to the Shining Star Group. What you said is very true. The combination of the two can fully play the role of 1 plus 12. Backquote, you said, did Hammer offend someone? Otherwise, how could such a person go to prison? Don't worry about it so much, first think about how to annex Hammer Industries on a large scale. If this is really successful, the company's bonus alone will make us rich. Lin looked at the people who were discussing intensely below, and saw that they did not fully suspect that the news was fake, and discussed it completely, and couldn't help but nodded slightly. Sure enough, after the screening of the words and the law, the loyal ones are easy to use. If those half-hearted employees really have to mess with themselves, they may even leak secrets. Mind so. Just in case, Lin said softly to everyone below. I think. Everyone below, keep your mouth shut. Well, although these people below have been screened, they are loyal to the Shining Star Group. But just in case, someone said that it leaked, Lin still put a layer of backhand. As long as other people lure, these people below will be very vigilant and immediately change the subject. As time passed by, everyone below had a heated discussion, and slowly began to weaken Qian Li's. Soon, the meeting room fell silent. Seeing this, Lin said directly to the people below. On how to annex this aspect. I believe everyone's professional level, you should have a general plan in your mind. 5. Now, who will speak first? Everyone looked at each other, and a middle-aged man with a thin body stood up and said to Lin. Boss, I don't think the annexation of Hammer Industries is a problem as long as Justin is in jail. The most important thing is to prevent other capital from robbing this piece of fat. Once they start in advance, our Shining Star Group may not be able to snatch too much. So, I think, we should. Hearing the other party's suggestion, Lin couldn't help sighing, the other party was really professional. With these few tricks going on, as long as there is an accident with Justin, Hammer will be swallowed cleanly by the Xingyao Group. A week later, Shining Star Group, the chairman's office. Lin saw the message pushed on the phone, and a smile appeared on her face. Hammer Industries has won a large-scale order from Shining Star Group, and its stock price has skyrocketed. Hammer Industries has in-depth cooperation with Shining Star Group. Shining Star Group expressed its deep optimism. Well, these are the prelude to the annexation of Hammer Industries. A few days ago, according to a large number of professional corporate annexation people, we conducted thorough exchanges and planned. It is found that as long as there is a problem with Justin Hammer, annexation is actually not difficult. After all, Justin himself is extremely obsessed with power, which leads to his absolute control. Moreover, the people under him have generally become answering worms, and the entire company has become a voice. Those who resisted or raised objections had long since been expelled by Justin. And his descendants are not great weapons. Occasionally, some outstanding ones are in other fields, but the business aspect is really not good. As long as I have an accident, the stock will fall if it falls, and the company will collapse if it collapses. But the crux of the problem is that Shining Star Group intends to annex, so other capitals will also have the same plan after they know about it. Therefore, how to grab the fattest piece of meat is the focus of everyone's discussion. But, the information about Justin's upcoming accident, only Lin knows, or only the people in the Shining Star Group know. Others were either unprepared, or simply didn't know. This, after repeated confirmation. They made a detailed plan. That is, deepen cooperation with Hanmo Industry and give a large number of orders. But it requires a short time to complete. Once it is not completed, it will take on huge debts. As long as Justin has an accident, the Shining Star Group can exert force to force the other party to convert the huge debt into equity. Otherwise go bankrupt. Moreover, this batch of orders is not a one-off. Rather, it is high volume, high frequency, targeted at various branches of Hammer Industries. Even if an order can be successfully completed, but under the pressure of other orders, absolutely, ACFI cannot hold. In addition, Xingyao Group will also do things secretly. If the other party still wants to engage in production, it will be hell if they don't make a fool of themselves and take on huge debts. There are many similar schemes. In short, it is a trap to make Hammer Industries take on a large amount of debt in a short period of time. To put it more figuratively, it is. Let it eat its mouth full of oil. At a critical moment, he pulled the rope and forced him to surrender. If he does not surrender, he will be hanged, and he will still eat dog meat. After surrendering, Xingyao had the final say in everything. Well, Lin is very pleased with that. Then, the person who will explain the company talks with the person from Hammer Industries about cooperation. And the most important task is to deal with those capital forces. Although he had pre-planned for Hammer Industries, trying to eat the fattest piece of meat. But other forces like the New York government, capital, military, etc., when they saw that the Shining Star Group had eaten such a large piece of fat for no reason, were absolutely jealous and wanted to grab it. Lin has to be responsible for finding more forces to fight the mines together. Otherwise, only relying on Xingyao Group itself, it is very likely that it will be besieged before it is digested. And his choice is a force like SHIELD, which originally had a partnership with the Shining Star Group, was not weak. Well, they all agreed when they heard Lin's plan. Then, waving a knife and fork, he entered the battle for the fat meat. Tut tut. This time, Xingyao Group will definitely have to endure. You know, Hammer Industries doesn't look like Stark Industries. But in fact, Justin Hammer's own ability is not weak, otherwise Hammer Industries will not become a tyrant in the military market. In addition, because Stark Industries has withdrawn from the military market on a large scale, Hammer Industries has now occupied a large market share and has become a giant in the entire military market. I ate but my stomach was full. This time, it's time to switch to Xingyao and SHIELD. They have a lot of food. As for Tony's side, a brief note is for Hammer Industries, but not much more. After all, the source of Justin's problems was Tony. If there are a lot of changes on Tony's side and Justin doesn't go to jail, then the Shining Star Group will be in trouble. Be aware that these orders may be real money and have legal effect. It is only when Hammer Industries will undergo great changes that they dare to sign this way. If such a problem really arises, Lin can only shamelessly come to the door and solve Justin with words and methods. But if you really want to do this, the impact will be more serious. You know, Lin has extraordinary ability, which is no longer a top secret. At that time, everyone was in danger, and the collective siege of Lin was even more troublesome. So, for Tony's side, Lin doesn't even dare to push too hard now. For fear of affecting the development of things. Lin decided, having watched Tony make a fuss lately, he wouldn't get involved. Just waiting to finally pick up the fork and eat the fat. It really doesn't work, so I'll give Tony some points at the end so he can taste it too. Well, Pepper would definitely agree, after all, she's now CEO of Stark Industries. At this moment, Lin is playing games in his office. As the chairman of a large group, coupled with the world's top programming skills. I have already moved out the game of my previous life's fire. For example, the glory of the Emperor. The Jedi is alive. Now Lin can be said to be playing and picking up money. Everyone knows the terrifying speed at which games absorb money. It can be said that these popular games directly made Xingyao Group's mouth full of oil. It provides a large amount of capital guarantee for the company's unprofitable departments, branches and investments. While he was playing games with his mobile phone. Sudden perception to a wave of energy fluctuations. Lin's eyes narrowed, and she put down her phone and looked at the other side. He is very familiar with this energy fluctuation. Not surprisingly, the person who came should be the magician of Kamar Taj, Caecilius. For Caecilius, Lin's original attitude was more exclusive. He knew that the future Caecilius was likely to become a disciple of Dormammu. It was then plotted by the Ancient One magician to become Doctor Strange's sacrifice to the Sorcerer Supreme. Therefore, at first his attitude towards Caecilius was relatively general. He has communicated with the magician of the entire Kamar Taj, and even spent money to send gifts to brush up his favorability. But I found that all magicians have a very general attitude towards him. Except for Caecilius. Maybe he knew Lin's strength and the Ancient One's value. So the attitude towards Lin can be considered friendly. For example, some basic meditation or spellcasting tips about their magician. Like Mordo Magician and Wong Magician, they refused to mention it. And Caecilius was willing to speak to Lin. So, the relationship between the two started to get better. And Lin's understanding of Caecilius, and he also knows that he will become a believer of Dormammu in the future, largely stems from the obsession of strength, resurrection and immortality. However, this is not a big problem for Lin. The Keel he has just mastered now is enough to prolong life. Even using the power of the Source to resurrect people is not a problem. As for the power, Lin, who has the ability to follow his words, said he is very confident. So, Lin held Caecilius with a solicitous attitude. Occasionally, he also indicated to him the power that he possessed about longevity and resurrection. The relationship between the two is getting closer. From time to time Caecilius also revealed to Lin some of Kamar Taj's gossip and even some secrets. He is now a key link in Lin's connection with Kamar Taj. In this regard, the Ancient One magician does nothing, allowing it to develop freely. Lin doesn't believe that bigwigs like Ancient One can't be unaware. In this case, from Lin's point of view, the Ancient One magician should have allowed himself to handle Caecilius' affairs, which is somewhat happy. In other words, Ancient One should have paid more attention to Caecilius. It's just that the other party is too obsessed and ultimately chooses a wrong path. When a better path naturally arises, it is more pleasant to see it succeed. Soon, in Lin's eyes, the energy fluctuations became stronger and stronger, and a circle of sparks appeared. It was Caecilius. After Caecilius stepped out of the teleportation circle, he spoke to Lin, who was sitting in the chair. Lin, good morning. Sorcerer Supreme is looking for you. What? Lin whimpered lightly. What can the Ancient One magician find himself for? Nothing major recently. The world is quite peaceful. No, at this time, it seems that something is really going to happen. Lin pondered in his head as he stood up and spoke to Caecilius. Okay, got it. Wait a minute, I'll arrange the company affairs. Just meet Sorcerer Supreme with you. Afterwards, Lin Ren directly picked up the phone next to him and asked his assistant a few words. In the presence of Caecilius. The emphasis requires the company to proceed with its plan to annex Hammer Industries. And, be sure to be firm and precise, not too procrastinating. When Caecilius next to him heard it, a hint of surprise flashed across his face. Unexpectedly, Lin has such a plan. He has also heard about Hammer Industries, which is not weak, and Lin's forces even want to annex it. And he had already made a plan, and he seemed to have a plan, so Caecilius had to let Caecilius sigh inwardly. Lin didn't pay attention to the change in Caecilius' expression after finishing his instructions, and followed the teleportation channel directly into Kamar Taj. Afterwards, follow Caecilius to the Ancient One magician. Soon, Lin came to the tea room where she came last time. Seeing Ancient One magician drinking tea, he stretched out his hand to Bo, and said respectfully. Sorcerer Supreme, I have come. Listen to Caecilius, you have something to do with me. Excuse me, what's the matter? If I can do it, I will help it. After hearing this, Ancient One magician smiled and said lightly. No hurry, let's drink tea first. Then he glanced at Caecilius, who was withdrawing backwards, and said. Caecilius, don't worry, you two sit down and have a cup of tea. The next thing has to do with you. Caecilius immediately reached out his hand, answered humbly, and sat down next to Lin. Very respectfully raised the teacup and slowly tasted the tea in the cup. Lin looked at it and compared her attitude, as if feeling the difference. Well, I don't feel like I'm very professional. Although I look very respectful, I feel a little sloppy. Then, sitting upright, learning from Caecilius, sipping the tea in the cup. Ancient One magician looked at it, smiled, and said nothing. The three of them slowly sipped the tea in the cup. As if he was comprehending something, he generally didn't say a word. At first, Lin could hold back and slowly taste the taste of the tea in the cup. Time passed slowly, Lin couldn't sit still, and looked at Caecilius, who had been sitting beside him. He couldn't help but sigh that his calming skills were not in place. Then, asked tentatively to the Ancient One magician. Sorcerer Supreme, you asked me to come here, there must be something urgent. I don't know, what can I help in that? Seeing this, Ancient One magician showed a faint smile on his face, then refilled Lin An's cup with some tea, and then slowly said. Lin, in ancient times, there were a large number of gods and supernatural forces on the earth. They are the rulers who rule the whole earth. Later, Kamar Taj rose up and started a massive cleanup, driving away the gods. In other words, doing things that are, heaven and earth. During this period, the gods who resisted, the weak and the weak were wiped out, and the powerful were completely expelled. At the same time, it has also established friendly cooperative relations with some powerful gods. That's how the earth is now peaceful. Hearing this, Lin nodded heavily, as if feeling quite emotional. Then, the Ancient One magician continued. Currently, we Kamar Taj have a friendly partnership with Odin, the god king of Asgard. Generally speaking, we don't interfere with each other's development. When facing foreign enemies, we fight together. But there has been a recent dispute in Asgard over the heir to the throne. Therefore, the god King Odin entrusted Kamar Taj to take care of the safety of his sons. I think that. The next day, Mexico, outside the town, outside the crater. Caecilius looked at the very lively crater not far away. Especially staring at the hammer in the middle, and then asked Lin next to him. This is the Thor artifact we're looking for. Hearing Caecilius' question, Lin nodded and said jokingly. Yes, it is said to be called Mjolnir. It's Thor's weapon. How's it going? It's quite lively over there. Would you like to try it? See if you can pull it up. It is said that if you pull it up, you can master Thor's power. Hearing this, Caecilius shook his head slightly and spoke slowly. Legends are just legends. No matter which artifact or magic weapon it is, it has the ability to recognize the master. Either the master of the magic weapon, or the strength is strong enough. 850. Otherwise, you can't use the other party's magic weapon at all. Otherwise, Lin, look over there, so many people are busy and haven't moved half a step. It means that this artifact has its owner, and the owner is not dead. Waiting for the master's return. Hearing this, Lin couldn't deny it and didn't say anything. But the heart kept complaining. There's nothing wrong with that, but unfortunately his father Odin is a tough character. Directly added a ban on the weapon, even the owner of the weapon cannot use it at present. Immediately afterwards, Caecilius asked Lin. Lin, Sorcerer Supreme, we must protect the life of Thor's son, Thor. The problem is that now only his weapon is found, no man. What's the next step? You have a lot of experience in this area, you decide. Well, he still knows Lin's strength very well, and he is definitely much stronger than himself. Follow the advice of the strong. Most of the time, there is definitely nothing wrong. More importantly, Caecilius turned his head and glanced back. It was followed by 20 members of the Special Operations Team in black battle suits. Can't help but complain. Lin has a large number of people, and the people who are called are not weak. What can he do? When Lin saw this, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and he waved to Caecilius and the members of the Special Forces team behind him, and said aloud. Go to the nearest town first, the weapons are here, and the people must be nearby. Inquire from the town to see if there are any newcomers. Generally speaking, the circulation of people in these small towns is not very large, and new people appear, and it is easy to get relevant news. Saying that, take Caecilius into the car, and then let the driver drive to the nearest town. Well, for this mission, the Ancient One magician asked him to bring Caecilius to protect Thor's life. It was said that he could not disturb his training in the middle, just let him live. Can't die on Earth. When Lin heard this, she groaned inwardly, which meant that it would be fine to die in Asgard. Originally, Lin felt that he could do or not to do this task. One can only blame Ancient One magician's reward for being too tempting. As if to know what Lin needs most. Give a copy of the original Power of Time gem directly. Tut tut. Just let Lin play chicken blood. The fifth order speech method requires 3 high-quality source powers, and the required attributes are different. As far as Lin knows, it can meet his requirements. Only the Time Gem, Space Gem on Earth, and the Mind Gem brought by Loki in the future. The rest, Lin doesn't know. Now that you can get the source power of Time Gem, the remaining space and the source power of Mind Gem are much easier to get started with. Wait for the New York War to start, seize the opportunity, and then you can upgrade rank 5 to speak the law. So, directly with Caecilius, and a group of Special Forces team members came to Mexico. That's where Mjolnir found it. Lin's motorcade drove into the town. Then send someone into the bar to inquire about the news. He and Caecilius found a hotel with a good environment. It was packaged directly, and the members of the Special Operations team were arranged to live in the back. Well, Caecilius knew after Lin had packed the whole hotel. Involuntarily, he muttered. Tyrant. Then, I found a house next to Lin and settled in very comfortably. As time passed, and soon, night came. Lin, at the moment, has received a message from a member of the Special Forces team. Going to talk to Caecilius tomorrow and watch Thor's current state 0. Boom. 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 There was a knock on the door. Lin shouted out curiously. Come in. The voice fell, and the door opened gradually. It's just Caecilius. Lin is a little puzzled. What does Caecilius have to do with him so late? So, curiously asked. Caecilius, what's the matter? What's the matter? After Caecilius came in, he stood opposite the company, hesitant and a little hesitant to speak. This made Lin even more curious and asked directly. Caecilius, what's the matter? If you can do it, you will definitely do it for you. If you can't do it, I can help you think of a way. Don't be hesitant, it's not good for everyone. When Caecilius heard what Lin said, he gritted his teeth and said directly. Lin, I want to ask something. I have an elder who I respect very much. But I found out that the power he used was the dark power. It's contrary to what I've been taught. I'm conflicted right now. I know that your strength is very strong, much stronger than me. So, I would like to ask, how do you view such a problem? Hearing this, it made me realize that I immediately understood the meaning behind Caecilius 5.8. Isn't it just the ancient one magician using the power of Dormammu? For Lin, such a thing is really not a problem. But for Caecilius, who has been educated and trained by magician, the use of dark power is extremely difficult to accept. Lin is not surprised by this. Just like Lin likes Oni-san and Tony likes models, it's not unacceptable to exchange them, but both of them will feel very uncomfortable. Well, there's nothing wrong with this analogy. However, in Lin's view, Caecilius was clearly on the cusp. So, took a look at Caecilius. Then, performing the words and sayings, under Caecilius's gaze, he said softly. Dark. Suddenly. Under the gaze of Caecilius, he found that a deep dark force suddenly appeared in front of Lin. Immediately, the fighting instinct cultivated subconsciously made him stand up immediately. The whole body is full of energy, full of hostility to this dark power. Seeing this, Lin said softly again. Bright. The voice fell, and in an instant, a warm, bright energy of white light appeared in front of Lin. Seeing this, Caecilius had a hint of doubt in his eyes. Immediately after, Caecilius saw Lin spit out a series of words. Flame. Evil. Justice. Despair. Lightning. Pain. Under the gaze of Caecilius, a large amount of energy of different colors appeared in front of Lin. There are gray evil powers, silvery white powers of justice full of courage, dark black despairing powers that carry the breath of despair, and thunder O2 electric powers. First there was a positive attribute energy, and then a negative attribute energy appeared. Repeated more than 10 times. Until Lin's words stopped, the power of other attributes no longer appeared in front of Lin. Then, under Caecilius' suspicious and wary gaze, Lin spoke lightly. I know who the respected elder you are talking about is. With my strength, I also perceive the same breath. But me, you were educated differently. In my opinion, power is good when used correctly, and evil when used evil. Attributes don't matter, what matters is what do you use it for. Protection or destruction. Do justice or preach evil. As far as I know a knight who uses demonic power, but every knight begins to punish the evil. Can you call him a villain? Also, I know that there is a reporter whose body contains an evil alien life form, and that alien life form wants to eat human brains every day. But under the communication with reporters, the two also began to embark on the road of justice. Although the alien lifeforms still clamor for eating human brains every day, in fact, he eats chocolate and chicken every day. You say he is evil. Hearing this, Caecilius seemed to perceive Lin's gaze on him. I found that my mouth could not open a little, and I didn't know how to continue. Then, I heard Lin continue. You magicians are educated and may be closely related to the environment you come into contact with. You face dimensional invasion every day, and the forces you come into contact with are extremely high-quality evil forces. Faced with the influence of those forces, the weak and weak are easily affected by them, so you are as fearful as tigers. I totally understand. Immediately afterwards, Lin's tone changed and he said questioningly. Some powerful magician, who study forbidden spells, in order to resist the invasion. Do you think he is good or evil? Facing Lin's questioning, Caecilius stood there blankly, wanting to open his mouth to tell, but he was hesitant. This. Before Caecilius could finish answering the question, Lin continued, in a more intense tone of questioning. A strong magician, willing to bear the erosion of the dark power alone, risking his life to shield the majority of weak magicians from the wind and rain. Do you think she is a good person or a bad person? Hearing this, Caecilius was stunned, and after a while, as if he had been thinking. Then he nodded heavily, and said in a deep voice, I get it. Thanks, Mr. Lin, for the persuasion. Hearing this, Lin had a faint smile on his face, then walked in front of Caecilius, patted him on the shoulder, and said comfortingly. Actually, in my opinion, the magician conditions of your Kamar Taj are tough. Faced with enemies, they are all extremely evil and powerful. Latitude Mephisto. If you don't pay attention, you may be affected by it. Even me, the last time I strangled Dormammu believers, I was targeted by Dormammu. If Sorcerer Supreme hadn't helped me, I might still be affected by that dark force now. More importantly, because you cultivate your power, most of you use various ingenious methods to cast spells with the help of some Justice Camp's Latitude Mephisto. Therefore, your life expectancy is very average. It is far inferior to those evil gods and those who believe in evil gods. Hearing this, Caecilius nodded with deep sympathy, and then said very bitterly. Indeed, I've seen a lot of my comrades die, especially the powerful, but older magicians. Looking at them, thinking about what they have done for the world, and comparing the longevity between the evil believers and our magicians. The psychological gap is huge. Hearing this, Lin quickly stepped forward and said. Actually, ever since I found out about Dimension Mephisto and Kamar Taj, I've been thinking about how to bridge the gap between the two. Kamar Taj is Earth's first line of defense against latitudinal invasions. If something goes wrong with Kamar Taj, the next person who will suffer will be extraordinary beings like us living on Earth. 850, due to lack of relevant experience, is prone to various problems, causing the entire Earth to be reduced to the domain of the Dimension Mephisto. I will do my best, while mobilizing other forces to secure Kamar Taj. Your biggest concern is about longevity. I have a way to prolong life here, and even a technology that can be resurrected as long as you pay a lot of money. These. All. Communicate with Kamar Taj. 9. Or. If you face large-scale cannon fodder, we can also mobilize military weapons and mercenaries to assist. In short, it is to ensure that the dimensional Mephisto does not break through the first line of defense of the Earth, Kamar Taj. Caecilius heard the various support methods that Lin kept talking about, especially the information about life extension and resurrection, and his eyes lit up until Lin finished speaking. Excitedly, he confirmed it again and again. Mr. Lin, are you sure? Is everything you say true? In response, Lin nodded heavily and said loudly. What I say will come true. At the moment, in a space unknown to Lin, the Ancient One magician saw this scene and nodded slightly. The next day, town, hospital. Lin and Caecilius, who were standing outside the ward, looked at the very handsome man lying on the bed. Watching the three doctors constantly press and bind, shouting helplessly. I am Thor. I demand to see your king. Then. A doctor next to him seemed to be unable to bear it, and directly picked up an electric shocker next to him. Lie down against the patient on the bed and press hard. Zzz. With the sound of the electric shock, the patient on the bed began to shake violently. Soon, he didn't say a word, his eyes were blank, and it was obvious that he had been electrocuted. At the moment, Caecilius looked at Lin, who was recording with his phone next to him, speechless. Some helpless, mixed with doubts asked. Lin, you are sure that the person who was stunned by the shocker is Thor? Instead of a psychopath. Lin listened to Caecilius' helpless tone, and said with a lot of smiles on his face. Yes, that's for sure. The blood in his body does contain the breath of thunder and lightning. It's just that it was blocked by a powerful force, so it looks no different from ordinary people. Then, his tone changed, and he said jokingly. Caecilius, do you want to take a picture and record it? Thor was numb with a small electric shock. This scene is absolutely worth tens of millions. Hearing this, Caecilius also seemed to think of something, then laughed out loud, took out his mobile phone and started taking pictures. While taking pictures, Lin said with a smile. Don't forget to wait a while, and send me a copy of you. Don't say it, this scene is too funny. Definitely a collection. Well, after the conversation last night, the relationship between the two has obviously improved a lot. Caecilius, who was originally depressed, became visibly cheerful. Well, finding this change makes Lin feel great. This is his first villain to correct. Give him a sense of accomplishment. More importantly, Caecilius is not weak, masters a lot of spells, and has a very deep knowledge of latitude Mephisto and latitude invasion. A strong man on the magic side. If you have some knowledge in the future, it is not convenient to find Sorcerer Supreme, so you can directly find Caecilius. His authority in Kamar Taj is very high, and most taboo books and taboo knowledge can be viewed. Well, Lin isn't stuck on a tiny earth, he's curious about those latitudes, Mephisto, and others. They are almost hitting Lin's house. Shouldn't Lin be allowed to come to their house, plunder, and Yongwei? If you don't do this, are you too sorry that you have crossed over this time? Relevant thoughts flashed by. Facing a small request from Caecilius, Lin smiled and agreed directly. He came to Mexico this time, and since he knew about Thor's various embarrassments, he naturally wouldn't miss it. This time he prepared 10 smartphones. The information is synchronized in real time. Even if one mobile phone is broken, the other mobile phone can still be used. Well, Thor's various embarrassments, he has to decide, he can use it as a joke or as a collection in the future. Tut tut. It really doesn't work, you can also extort money. Soon, under the watchful eyes of Lin and Caecilius, the doctor who had given Thor's injections, infusions and examinations had already left the ward. Then, looking at Jane, Professor Selvig and others who came in a hurry, Lin motioned for Caecilius to leave temporarily. Looking at Caecilius' suspicious gaze, Lin explained casually. The current Thor has not been beaten by society. The arrogance of the gods has not completely faded away. After a few days, after experiencing the beatings of the society, and discovering that I am just an ordinary person, I will communicate better at that time. Caecilius, after thinking about it, found it to be reasonable, so he didn't say more, and continued to follow Lin to the outside. Then, watch as Lin instructs the driver to drive to Mjolnir's location. Although he was puzzled, he didn't say much. After all, Lin was a lot of people, he was alone, plus, he didn't know what to do now, so he went with it. Soon, the car had reached the vicinity of the crater created by Mjolnir. Caecilius looked at the crater and did not see the noisy scene last time. Instead, around the crater, a large number of ordinary people had begun to set up tents and buildings. A look of doubt flashed in his eyes. Lin didn't see the doubt in Caecilius' eyes and said directly. Let's go, there is a force in front of us that has close cooperation with Xingyao. Let's go to fight the autumn wind. Later, I might want them to help. Saying that, Lin gave Caecilius a look, as if to imply something. Our plan, if they are involved, will go more smoothly. Well, Lin has decided that he will pull S.H.I.E.L.D. over to make a thunderstorm later. As the top official force of the Earth, the profession is very suitable. Cannon fodder? No, there are still a lot of people, and there are several major alliances behind them. Tut tut. The thunder that can be carried will definitely not be less. By the way, give them a little distraction and find something to stop staring at him. Lin. He knew that now some people are starting to notice the Shining Star Group in Lin. There is no way, in only 1 or 2 years, to establish a large group with a market value of 300 billion, and it is currently annexing Hammer Industries. It has to be paid attention to. The entanglement of these people and these forces is also troublesome for Lin. The strength is not strong, but like sticky candy, no matter how you throw it, you can't get rid of it. It's also hidden deep, it's just disgusting. Opening parenthesis. Qian Li's. Soon, Lin, with Caecilius and the security behind him, placed them in Mjolnir's camp directly towards S.H.I.E.L.D. Lin looked at the vigilant eyes of the guard at the gate of the camp and said with a smile. Go to your chief Phil Coulson and say. The advisor to S.H.I.E.L.D. has arrived at Pine. Well, after repeated advice from Lin, Nick Fury finally managed to change his name. After the guard heard it, he vigilantly swept everyone in front of him, especially the members of the Special Operations team who were wearing black battle suits and holding weapons behind them. Then he said cautiously. Wait a minute, I'll go to the commander now. Immediately, go inside. Soon, the doorman came out with Phil Coulson behind him. Phil Coulson saw Lin standing not far away and shouted in mock surprise. How are you, Mr. Lin? Well, He really didn't see who was coming through the surveillance video just now. Phil Coulson knew the moment Lin arrived, and immediately thought, something bad happened. The anomaly was so obvious that there was absolutely nothing good about Lin coming here. Maybe, get ready to snatch the spoils with S.H.I.E.L.D. After all, the things are there, and S.H.I.E.L.D. can't move them, can't hide them. With Lin's ability, he is not sure whether the other party has a way to store abnormal items. So, he immediately called his director Nick Fury to report the situation. After listening to it, the director told him that the Shining Star Group and S.H.I.E.L.D. have just begun to cooperate closely. Lin is now an advisor to S.H.I.E.L.D., so moderate permissions are open. At the same time, he also explained the bottom line to him and hung up. Well, he's busy with Tony and Hammer Industries right now, and doesn't want to be directly hostile to Lin right now. After all, Lin gave him a big piece of fat, although there were a few bones in it, but it was delicious after all. In any case, after digestion, consider the relationship between the two, and now we must maintain close cooperation. With the director's reply, Phil Coulson immediately made arrangements to meet Lin confidently. Then, Phil Coulson saw Lin not far away and shouted in surprise. How are you, Mr. Lin? 853 inches. Are you visiting Mexico too? The scenery here is really good, the desert scenery, it is worth browsing. Do you need me to arrange a few guides here to show you the special scenery and special food here? Lin looked at the large number of white buildings in front of him, and then watched Phil Coulson's face remain unchanged and nonsense, secretly complaining in his heart. Then he replied with a smile. I have a friend who has dropped a hammer on you. He asked me to help him watch it for a while. Phil Coulson, get someone to come with me, the hammer is not far away. There are few people here, so you can help me guard it when the time comes. Caecilius, who was next to him, was speechless when he saw the conversation between the two. Good guy, one directly said travel, the other directly asked the other party to help guard things. I don't know, I thought they were helping each other. Afterwards, both of them cursed to themselves. Then, Phil Coulson spoke up. Mr. Lin, S.H.I.E.L.D. has responsibility for managing anomalous affairs, as you, as a consultant to S.H.I.E.L.D., should be aware of that. This hammer is obviously an anomalous item, so S.H.I.E.L.D. will store it in accordance with the law. If his owner is found, we will communicate again to determine the ownership of the hammer. It will be returned to its original owner at that time. Well, there is nothing wrong with this. When people join S.H.I.E.L.D., the hammer will not still be S.H.I.E.L.D. As for not adding, sorry, who are you? Come on, this person violated state secrets and put me in jail. Lin heard this, facing Phil Coulson, a little serious. Phil Coulson, I'm not kidding you. This hammer is a big deal. Once it's not dealt with, it can be said that a war affects two countries or two worlds. Then, he said in a serious tone. You sure? Do you want to stop me? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. The family is a prince, something happened on your side, and the weapon was robbed. According to normal logic, there must be a fight. Hearing this, Phil Coulson frowned. He knew that Lin was a man who was very fond of jokes and mischief. But the big things are still clear. Seriously speaking, it may be true. Then, he gave Barton a look behind him and saw Barton's leaving figure. Then he made a gesture of invitation and replied sternly. Consultant Lin, please elaborate on this point. After all, the war you speak of is in everyone's interest. Well, this is a high-level ACFI, and a big hat is buttoned down. Lin was immediately speechless, but didn't say much. Go directly to the camp set up by S.H.I.E.L.D. Entering a conference room, Lin saw Barton hurriedly approaching, and immediately knew that this matter was done. Soon, Lin saw Barton say something before Phil Coulson. Then Phil Coulson brought a cup of coffee and spoke to Lin with a friendly smile. Consultant Lin, after all, this matter involves the responsibility of S.H.I.E.L.D. Could you please explain in detail? It's good for us to make judgments and prevent the worst from happening. It's also for the safety of the world. Well, as expected of the next S.H.I.E.L.D. director, this Mandarin is a set of sets. Lin took a look at the coffee and found that the quality was okay. It was the type she liked, and Phil Coulson did a good job. Then he took a small sip and said lightly. This time, we came here because we were entrusted by others. As for who it is, I can't go into details. Quote. What I can tell you is that the other party is the big guy who really protects the Earth. Not like Shield, who just talks and doesn't do it. Speaking of at the moment, he paused, looked at the expressionless Phil Coulson, and continued. Because of her existence, the Earth is protected from the invasion of Latitude Mephisto and a large number of evil supernatural forces. And this time, our target is a prince of the kingdom of God, that is, the future king of gods. He came to Earth to experience, and we were entrusted to protect his life. Don't put his life at risk. Otherwise, once an accident occurs on Earth, it will be the trigger for the start of 2 world wars. Having said that, Lin looked at Phil Coulson lightly, as if to tell him how difficult this task was. Well, there's nothing wrong with this statement, it's just pulling the tiger's skin, pulling the flag, exaggerating the danger, and it's a set of procedures. Really? After Phil Coulson heard it, with a serious face, he gave Lin Chin a cup of coffee, and then the questions were continuously asked like cannonballs. Lin, your question is serious, but I want to ask more. More. What is the strength of the other country? Who is that prince? Compared with the Earth, who has the upper hand? Before Phil Coulson could finish his question, Lin reached out and interrupted, took another sip of coffee, and said calmly. The other country's name is Asgard. The name of the other side's country is Asgard. Having said that, Lin glanced at Phil Coulson, then asked with a smile. Doesn't this name sound familiar? Sure enough, Phil Coulson's face showed a look of surprise, a little incredulous, and asked tentatively. Lin, is the Asgard you're talking about the same, what I think? Hearing this, Lin nodded heavily and continued, speaking. Yes, as you think. The other is a kingdom of gods. The leading god King Odin has a splendid name in the entire universe. And the Earth before that belonged to Asgard. It's called Midgard. Having said that, Lin looked at the stunned Phil Coulson with satisfaction, then took another sip of coffee and continued. Later, because of the rise of our Earth bosses, Midgard gained independence, but it still belongs to Asgard's territory and name. It's just that the god King Odin let the Earth develop. That's why we have the present Earth civilization. Having said that, Lin pointed to Caecilius next to him and said to Phil Coulson. That big guy, we call it the Sorcerer Supreme. In the entire universe, in all surrounding latitudes, there is a great reputation. And he is a disciple of Sorcerer Supreme. The Sorcerer Supreme gives the mission. This time he and I secretly guard Prince Asgard Thor. Now, do you understand the importance of this matter? Hearing this, Phil Coulson nodded subconsciously, and then asked suspiciously as if he had thought of something. Lin, I just heard what you said, Asgard should be very powerful. Thor, as a god, should not be weak. Why? For you to keep him safe. Hearing Phil Coulson's question, Lin applauded secretly in his heart, knowing that the time had come, and then said with a serious face. Phil Coulson, this time Thor came to Earth. It was his last experience before becoming a god king, so he was sealed with all power by god King Odin. He's just a normal guy now. So, we need to guard it secretly. Speaking of this, Lin's tone became more serious and said very solemnly to Phil Coulson. More importantly, Asgard has 2 princes. Second Prince Loki is very keen on the throne and is well versed in intrigue. And now the great Prince Thor has come to Earth, all powerless, to undergo the final trial of the throne. Having said that, Lin looked at Phil Coulson and gave a meaningful look. You said, what will happen? Hearing this, Phil Coulson's face was shocked and he said bitterly. You mean? Before Phil Coulson could finish speaking, Lin nodded directly. Yeah, just what you think. As long as something happens to Thor on Earth, no matter who it is, Earth will hardly be spared. Maybe, it will become a sacrifice before they become the king of gods. Hearing this, Phil Coulson asked urgently. Now, do you know where Thor is? I'm sending someone to protect him now. Hearing this, Lin said to Kelson, shaking his head slightly. The god King Odin made Thor lose all his powers and came to Earth to be trained. You said, what if you send someone to protect you now? So, you need to be like me, and you can protect it secretly. Don't get too involved in the fight between them. The only thing we have to do is not let Thor die on Earth. This is also the task assigned by the Sorcerer Supreme. Hearing this, Phil Coulson hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I understand what you mean. I can send someone to watch it secretly. Also, do I need to mobilize the power of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Dealing with the impending crisis. Hearing this, Lin's eyes lit up, secretly said yes, and said directly. I advise you to be highly prepared. Arranged like any tank missile. It is recommended that a nuclear bomb be arranged as well. Speaking of which, Lin's tone was somewhat meaningful. You know, this time you are facing a god. The strength of the opponent's dispatch will definitely not be weak. It just so happens that you S.H.I.E.L.D. specialize in this field, so you can also prepare to test the power of Asgard. Hearing this, Phil Coulson's eyes lit up, then nodded directly to Lin, and quickly replied. Okay Lin, I see what you mean. I will contact the director immediately and ask for support. Well, Phil Coulson knew exactly what Lin was implying. On the one hand, there is a real test of the gap between Asgard and the power of the United States. On the other hand, this is to put some pressure on the World Security Council and the 5 rogue states behind it. After all, in the face of a strong enemy, it is possible to further increase support for S.H.I.E.L.D. At that time, the emergence of Asgard will bring new development opportunities for S.H.I.E.L.D. Therefore, the bigger the scene, the better, and the more it can highlight the sense of crisis, the better. It's better to let the big shots in the chair see how serious the danger is, and they will not go out of their way to support S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, this trick was used by S.H.I.E.L.D. before, when the Kree attacked Earth. Although later stopped by Captain Marvel. But through the influence of the alien invasion shaped by that war, the World Security Council has strongly supported the development of S.H.I.E.L.D. Otherwise Nick Fury wouldn't have the money to build an air carrier and so many private bases. Phil Coulson has experienced all of this himself, and he understands the inner truth. Seeing this, Lin also smiled faintly and nodded slightly. Then leave a contact for Phil Coulson and leave with Caecilius. After leaving the base built by S.H.I.E.L.D., Lin looked at Caecilius' puzzled eyes and said lightly. S.H.I.E.L.D., this organization, I know very well. If you don't tell him the danger, it's easy to cause trouble. Moreover, they have a large number of technological weapons in their hands, which will be of great help to our future development. Well, as for why Lin knew Asgard so well, Lin didn't say it, and Caecilius couldn't ask. One can only guess that Lin had a source of intelligence of his own, otherwise he would never have known about Kamartaj before. Immediately, without thinking much, Caecilius followed Lin towards the town. After all, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with what Lin just said, except for the feeling of being a little intimidating, everything else is correct. Well, both are correct, just another way of saying it. Even if Phil Coulson interviews Thor later, he will only become more and more convinced of everything Lin says. Lin believes that the prepared S.H.I.E.L.D. will not let him down. 3 days later, Mexico, S.H.I.E.L.D. camp. Phil Coulson looked at the monitor in front of him, and asked Lin and Caecilius next to him with some doubts. Lin, why is the monitor showing this Thor talking to himself? He seemed to be communicating with someone. Sitting in a chair, Lin, who was drinking tea, saw this, and said 2 words lightly to the monitor. Show. In an instant, a faint light appeared on the monitor. Immediately afterwards, the monitor screen began to change. A handsome man in a black suit appeared and kept communicating with Thor. Lin saw the surprised eyes of Phil Coulson and Caecilius and said lightly. He is Loki, the second prince of Asgard. He followed his mother, Queen Frigga of Asgard, to practice Asgard 870 guard magic. Although not as strong as Thor, it is not weak. Ordinary S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, you can't even see where he is, let alone catch him. With that said, Lin also glanced at Phil Coulson. He didn't forget that Phil Coulson died at the hands of Loki because he didn't see Loki's tracks clearly during the battle in New York. Hearing this, Phil Coulson stared at the image displayed on the screen with vigilant eyes. It was as if he was going to be deeply etched in his mind. Then, through the monitor, the 3 watched Loki talk to Thor. Thor roared in despair, and Loki tried to pull Mjolnir, but couldn't pull it off anyway. Phil Coulson saw Loki leave, and immediately rushed to the room where Thor was being held. He was deeply curious about Thor's desperate roar just now. What would make a god like this? Lin followed closely. Soon, Phil Coulson saw Thor and asked with some doubts. Hello, Mr. Thor. What happened just now? Why did I hear you yelling? Any questions? Thor glanced at Phil Coulson, didn't speak, just kept silent. Father is dead. Father is dead. Because of my fault. Hearing this, Phil Coulson froze, then glanced at Lin behind him. Looking at Lin and giving him a look, he immediately understood, and began to walk out of the room slowly, allowing Thor to blame himself. Phil Coulson is not stupid, according to Lin's introduction to Loki earlier. Apparently, this was a plot by Loki to pursue Asgard's throne. Once again confirmed what Lin said before, I am afraid most of it is true. Well, it is the instinct of an agent to not easily believe what anyone says. After returning to the monitoring room, Phil Coulson asked Lin hesitantly. Lin, as you said earlier, there will definitely be a big fight here in the future. Would you like me to prepare to evacuate the crowd? Prevent it from spreading to the masses? Well, Phil Coulson is quite human in S.H.I.E.L.D. If it were Nick Fury, who cares about the crowd, he can still cover his eyes if he stays here. Lin nodded at this. It doesn't matter to him, anyway, in the end S.H.I.E.L.D. and Loki will do the right thing and wait for him to lead the situation. At that time, S.H.I.E.L.D. will not be able to escape if he wants to. At that time, if he throws some good points, he will not be able to get on his big ship. Seeing this, Phil Coulson immediately arranged for the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent to prepare for the evacuation of the crowd. At the moment, Jane, Professor Selvig, and his assistant Daisy Lewis came to the S.H.I.E.L.D. camp to pick up Thor. Phil Coulson thought for a moment, briefly asked Lin's opinion, and got a positive answer. Let Professor Selvig take Thor away immediately. Looking at Jane's leaving figure, Lin said lightly to Phil Coulson, as if pointing at something. Thor seems to have a crush on this Jane Foster. I suggest you S.H.I.E.L.D. to take good care of Miss Foster. Hearing this, Phil Coulson's eyes lit up, then nodded heavily to his face, and said with a hint of understanding. Okay, I see what you mean. Well, isn't it just through Jane's influence on Thor? This trick, S.H.I.E.L.D. is an expert. They act as agents, which must be learned. Maybe, the friendly relationship between the two worlds will start from now on. 3 days later, in a small town in Mexico, Professor Selvig rented a hut. Jane Foster was eating face to face with Thor, the affection they exuded. Let Professor Halvig and his best friend Daisy look at each other helplessly. Keep your head down and continue cooking. Well, dry rice people, dry rice souls, and dry rice are all good people. Suddenly, bang, 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 there was a knock on the door. Daisy looked at Jane and Thor, who were indifferent, and then looked at the eyes of Professor Halvig opposite. Helplessly stood up and trot over to open the door. After opening the door, I suddenly saw a handsome young man in a blue suit standing at the door, followed by an equally handsome uncle. Suddenly stunned, I couldn't help sighing inwardly, so handsome. Then, he looked at the two of them with maddened eyes. It was Lin and Caecilius. At the moment, Lin looked helplessly at the nympho Daisy Lewis in front of her. Thinking of her personal information, real name identification, she is definitely a single dog. Immediately, standing in front of Daisy, he shook his hand and said lightly. Please let me know, I'm looking for Mr. Thor Odinson. After hearing the question from the handsome guy in front of her, Daisy came back to her senses and invited the two handsome guys into the house very attentively. Then some panicked and loud roar shouted. Short 5.8, Thor, someone's coming for you. Lin's eyes twitched slightly when she heard Daisy's huge amounts of voice. Immediately decided not to pay attention to this person. At the moment, eating face to face with Jane, Thor hears Daisy's roar shout. He raised his head subconsciously, looked at the two people not far away with some doubts, stood up, walked to Lin, and asked curiously. Hello, I'm Thor. What's the matter? Hearing Thor's apparently mild tone, Lin couldn't help but nodded slightly. Sure enough, Thor, who has experienced social beatings, can speak human words. Immediately, the tone was light. Entrusted by the great sorcerer supreme, I will be in charge of all arrangements on earth, Lord Thor Odinson. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and support our channel.